Note, 3 of our governing body members have decided to participate electronically via teleconference, and their remote participation is per our previously adopted city policy. This is for the purpose of maintaining a continuous in-person quorum of 4 governing body members during the pandemic, because a quorum must be physically present in order to conduct business. And let me clarify and confirm that all 7 governing body members will be participating equally in this meeting, regardless of whether they are in person or by teleconference. And this includes the ability to vote, which is in compliance with meeting laws per the Code of Virginia. So per the Code of Virginia, each council member will need to state the location from which they are participating prior to the governing body vote to approve their participation. I will state each council member's name, and they will say where they are for the record. So, Council Member Hector Sendejas.
I'm currently at my house at 178 Golden Drive.
Okay, thank you. Council Member Miriam Machado.
This is Miriam Machado. 924 This is my home. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Preston Banks.
I'm at my place at 9463 Grandview Drive, number 1436 at Manassas Park.
Okay, thank you. We now need a motion to approve their participation via teleconference.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. We now have all 7 members of the governing body participating tonight. I would also ask that those of us here in person would be very mindful of those who are teleconferencing in, so they'll have ample opportunity to comment and question and participate, so that out of sight does not become out of mind. So with that, we will go on to join us in a moment of silence. And Councilmember Javed, would you lead us in the pledge?
Do we need to approve the agenda?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Did you want to add a couple of agenda items that
Oh,
we discussed?
yes, we need to approve the agenda. So far, I have the addition of items 7A, Library Advisory Board term length approval, 8C, resolution designating Planning Commission size, and 8D, proposed schedule discussion regarding scheduling. Do we have anything for closed meeting?
No, Mayor, we don't.
Okay. Are there any other edits or changes to the agenda? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Mayor, I want to clarify, we probably ought to get those that are calling in remotely to individually acknowledge it, because we need a unanimous vote for this.
Okay. Would you please state your name and how you vote?
This is Miriam Machado. Aye.
Aye.
Preston Banks, aye.
Okay, that was unanimous, so the agenda is approved. Okay, join us in a moment of silence.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on, there are no recognitions, nothing for information, there is no, okay, so let us move right on to our public hearing for March 31st. This next item is a public hearing regarding the unsolicited PPEA, PPTA proposal from Norton Scott for the downtown area. We do have the capability to maintain social distancing at this location, but we did encourage everyone to please view the presentation that City Manager taped and placed on YouTube. And that was an excellent and complete presentation. We had also requested that people email us their comments and questions, which we have received some. Also to call in during the live stream, and that number is 703-335-5385. 703-8808. That's 703-335-8808. Or to make comments or questions via Facebook Live. So with that, I declare the public hearing open.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the governing body. I hope you all can hear me well at home. I just want to point out that we do have a member of the development team present here. Chelsea Rao is part of the Norton Scott team. Also on GoToMeeting, we do have multiple members from the development team, including Mr. Michael Scott, who's also part of the Norton Scott team. We have their attorneys, Mr. John Foote, and we also have Mr. Thomas Deneni as well, who's been helping out with the actual design component. So there are people here available either in person or via GoToMeeting from the development community. I did do the thorough presentation and posted it this weekend so that we would limit the time actually spent here physically present. So I don't know, Madam Mayor, if you want to do the questions first, or do you want to ask questions of the presentation to me, or do we want to just first read off the questions from the public? But I have nothing further to add beyond my presentation.
Okay, that was my question to you, if staff had anything that they wanted to add. I think we should commend City Manager on how complete, how detailed, and how excellent that presentation was on YouTube. It was 90 minutes, but it was 90 minutes well spent reviewing it. It was excellent. So if staff has no comments or questions, let's move on to governing body questions, if there are any. Or if you don't have any questions, you can always email them to City Manager at a later date. Okay?
I think I definitely will have questions, but I haven't watched the full video, so I feel maybe it would be premature for me to ask so many at this point. I may be able to narrow them down once there's a section there was some questions about. So.
Okay, well, just email them, copy all of us, because we can all benefit from the answers to those questions. Okay. So, Dean, are you okay? You have
I'm just watching.
Okay, I was going to say, you have a quizzical expression on your face. I thought you wanted to ask something. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Maybe for clarity, the only question I would have is I guess I was surprised that the development's going to take so long, especially on the Phase 4 side, that we're not looking till 5 or 6 or 7 years out. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. So for Phase 3, what really takes a while, there's two components. So the actual residential component, the 2/2s, the current plan is to develop roughly 40 units per year. That's what the market assessment determined as kind of the best buildable strategy. So there's, between 290 and 315 units, so you can do the math for why that takes roughly 7 to 8 years to build out, to have that steady stream of residential. From the commercial standpoint, the reason why we're limited is because of current City Hall. We don't want to have the current City Hall demolished until the new City Hall is ready. So that's what causes that commercial delay, because we would have to figure out what to do with everyone. It would be easier for kind of the city manager, staff, finance. We could certainly work from other locations, but the treasurer, the registrar, especially the registrar because of elections requirements, it's not as easy to find another temporary location for them. So that's what causes the commercial delay. The focus tonight is, of course, Phase 3, but from the full downtown perspective for Phase 4, they're splitting it also into kind of two components. So the first component of Phase 4 would be one of the residential developments, and that would happen likely sometime around FY23, and then or before, depending how quickly they can do everything, and then the second building somewhere in FY25, 26. So this is really a steady stream. When you count in Phase 2, the goal for Phase 2 is 2021, and then you start seeing residential units from Phase 3, 2022, likely Phase 4, 2022, 23, all the way out to 27, 28. You'll have a steady stream of new kind of real estate being added to the city.
If I can just clarify, so when we talk about Phase 2, big picture, we're talking about the Artena building in the back or behind the
Yeah, and the
Phase 1
development's
stuff.
behind it. Yeah.
Within the proposal, though, we have Phase 1A, Phase 1B, and Phase 2. For the Phase 3 portion that's
Yes.
part of the PPEA proposal.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys will be asked to vote on, the comprehensive agreement, and we'll talk about the scheduling here later on, but either at the end of April or the beginning of May, to vote on that. And then that will implement those phases within what we're calling Phase 3. So it's a little confusing. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, let me go
So
to the
kind of
slide.
3A and 3B and 3C-ish.
Yeah, you
Ish.
think of it like
Sorry,
that.
let me actually go to the slide that
Because
has
it's
the
the parts
phases on it.
of 3.
Right.
Are you
Phase
talking
3 is
about,
what Scott proposed.
are you talking about the phases
The
within
Phase 3 phases. Since
Okay,
tonight we're really
It might
foc-
be easier to refer to it to as components within the phase.
Yes, the components,
Yeah,
yeah.
like 3A
I-
or
Yeah, I
3B,
usually like when they
3C
do
or
Phase
something.
A, B, and C of Phase 3, but each developer's kind of uses the Phase 1,
Yeah.
Phase 2 within their own phases. But this specifically here, that entire area is Phase 3, and to Dean's point, you have a Phase 1A of Phase 3, a Phase 1B of the Phase 3 development, and a Phase 2 of the Phase 3 development. Phase 1A is the City Hall, the Square, the standalone commercial building, the VRE garage, and then the initial footprint for 2/2s. And then Phase 1B is the remaining commercial with the other parking and the new public road. And then Phase 2 is the remainder of the residential units. But again, for kind of the timing of the residential developments, there's really two components: the market, right, and kind of buildability, which says 40 units per year. But then there's also other restrictions in the actual agreement based off the commercial development as well, to make sure that we also lock in commercial development before all the residential stuff is completed.
I believe that Councilmember Javed.
Yeah, I
had a
just
question.
remembered, if you go to, I guess, slide 11, there's a couple of entrance and exit points. When, I didn't see a study or anything. When will we know if a traffic light would be needed during one of those intersections?
Yeah, so right now the plan is to have the traffic impact analysis as part of the site plan. There was an initial traffic survey, and Chelsea, I don't know if or Mike, you want to add to that? There was initial kind of traffic analysis that was done. Let me go to slide 11 here just so that
Yeah.
everyone sees.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for the delay. It's usually I'd be able to see and toggle easier through the slides, but this is the only view that I have as well. So this is a slide, so 11. So I don't know, Chelsea, if you want to add anything to that.
While she's getting up there, can I just point out real quick that ordinarily we would have done a traffic impact analysis or required a traffic study, but because of the way we're doing this, it has to do with acquiring land by the city for the VRE parking garage so we can get it moved to the better location. We have to initiate the rezoning on our own for Phase 1A, and that's something that will, if you approve the comprehensive agreement, that would then come before you in May, as we'll discuss later on tonight. We had pushed that to the site plan portion, but then what we're probably going to end up doing is having the traffic impact analysis when they come back in the fall for the full rezoning. So we're going to kind of fold in the Phase 1A rezoning, if you will, into the full site rezoning. The reason for that is that we need to make sure as a city that we can actually own the land, and they need to make sure as a developer that they have something of value, which would be the Bays tract rezoned to the MUD district if this goes forward as they're proposing. I hope that answers your question why there's no traffic impact analysis
Right.
done this first early phase.
So, okay.
And Chelsea, if you want to add to that.
Sure, and just thank you again for letting us come tonight and talk about this proposal and for accepting our unsolicited PPEA. The VRE did do a traffic study for the garage, so if you think about the way that the site will change from what is already planned, City Hall is already here, so you already have the traffic from that. The VRE garage did a traffic analysis for that garage going in, so you'll have that additional use. And then there's already commercial use here. So really the main impact you'll see is in Phase 1 in particular, from the 170 residential units at the back of the site, which we would really consider. I mean, part of what's driving us to do this development and why we like it so much is because you are adjacent to the VRE station, and we're big believers in transit-oriented development, and we are big believers that if you buy a condo unit next to a train track and a VRE station, you're probably going to use it more than you'll drive. So So again, these are initial assumptions. We will, as Lazo and Dean have said, do a further traffic impact analysis, but we don't anticipate a huge, we have had early discussions with Garreau Slade, which will be doing the analysis. We don't anticipate a huge impact from the additional residential usage.
Thank you. I'd like to go to our 3 council members who are now teleconferencing in. Councilmember Machado, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sendejas, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Vice Mayor Banks, do you have any questions?
Just one, will we incur any debt in this phase?
Will we incur any debt in this phase?
Yeah.
is what he said.
Hold on 1 second. We are having some technical issues. I have to raise the volume up here. Just give me 1 second to do that, and then Preston, I will answer your question. Hold on 1 second. I just can't see it there. There we go. Up to what, 50?
It's
Okay.
around sound.
There we go. Oops. Okay. Let me bring the PowerPoint back. Okay. So I apologize for that. So Vice Mayor Banks, you're asking about debt for the City Hall. Is that your question?
Right.
Yeah, so there is no debt for the City Hall. It's actually a lease purchase agreement. I know that was some confusion on social media as well about this being debt. It's not actually debt, it's a lease purchase. If we were to call this debt, then we would have to change a lot of things that we do in the city that we're not calling debt right now, and including the lease for the social services building. It's a 20-year lease. The value of this lease purchase is after 30 years, we actually have ownership of the building itself, and there's kind of partial ownership already built into the actual agreement itself. But for social services, we don't have ownership after that lease is over. We lease our vehicles, we lease computers, we lease a lot of things in the city. So I think the better term that perhaps some people in the public were thinking of is a liability. It is a liability. That's the best term to utilize. There's a lot of liabilities that the city has. The goal is how you pay for that liability, right? So for social services, the lease, we identified a revenue source. For this lease purchase, we're identifying a revenue source that's not existing taxpayers. It's actually paid for by the development. So it's a liability that's paid for. There's another liability, though, that if we don't do this, is not paid for, which is the City Hall and the Public Works building, right? Those are future unfunded capital liabilities that are currently not paid for, that would have to be paid for by existing taxpayers if we don't pursue downtown development. So don't forget about that liability, the unfunded liability that we still have. And regardless of how we decide to define what is debt, our creditors and auditors are not going to define this as debt. This is not general obligation debt. That's a very separate, that's a specific definition for either general obligation debt or revenue bonds. This is a lease purchase agreement. The developers themselves are pursuing a form of debt called a certificate of participation. That's the debt associated with this, but from the city perspective, it's actually a lease purchase agreement.
There is, Preston, there is misinformation out in the community. As city manager said, this is not debt, this is lease to own. And lease to own is a very common concept. That's how we purchase our police vehicles and a lot of our emergency items is by doing lease to own. That's a very common concept.
Can I piggyback off of that? How exactly are we paying for it? Is this going to be from the property tax side or the commercial revenue, or what, and what percentage of that?
Yeah, so let me go, sorry here, let me actually go to the table here.
Is it 18?
There we go. Okay, 18. So this is the key slide here, right? As part of the full fiscal impact, right, there's going to be revenue generated. But just as a reminder, we took a very conservative approach for the revenue because I'm not counting any meals tax, sales tax, or B-pool tax from the commercial side of it, right? I'm saying we're not even counting that because remember the goal for this development was for those three items to help us pursue our larger goals, right? Tax cuts, pay raises, additional funding for public safety for schools. That's what that commercial dollars are supposed to provide. That's why they're not part of this analysis. I wanted to make sure that we were fiscally positive regardless of not counting those commercial. So I did look at existing real estate, existing personal property, and existing B-pool currently being generated by every single parcel of land that's going to be impacted. I subtracted that from all new real estate and personal property tax revenue to be generated from the development, and that net generated a positive or revenue, right? You have the revenues from those taxes, the real estate and the personal property taxes from the new developments, the net revenue minus existing revenues. That's that $119 million estimate there. Okay. And remember, in my presentation, I would say things like 26.5, 119 million, right? I know the numbers are exact there, but that's just a model, right? You really want to go for a range or a larger number there. So that's why my presentation, I purposely said things like 26.5 or other things like that, right? But that 119 million represents exactly that, the real estate and personal property taxes. Then there's additional proffer and land revenue as well that's factored into that. You have the total revenue. The city hall and public improvements associated with that development is this here. Remember, the net present value is different because they're just like any lease, right? There's a percentage of interest that you're paying on that, so it's growing over the life of the lease itself. That's true of the social services lease as well, where we negotiated escalators there as well. So you're talking about a $46 million liability that the city has from this, right? Clearly, we have more than enough revenue just from real estate and personal property on the development to cover that liability. This $54 million, we don't have to spend it. All I was showing there was if we were to spend the money that was generated on addressing the actual impacts of the development, police calls, fire calls, all those things, that's where we would have to spend it. But just like I said in my presentation, we've grown as a city since 2009. We've continued to add residential units, and our staffing levels have dropped. So we haven't done this $54 million for previous developments. All I'm showing is that we have enough to cover that if we decide to do that and still have a profit just from real estate and personal property taxes. Again, not counting the commercial B-poll, sales, and meals tax. Add those, whatever we can get with that, to this 26.5 million. That's now where you start being able to do those things that we want to do to be a financially strong community.
So even if we were to have no commercial move into this development, it would still pay for it?
Correct. Correct. The only risk to us is if the development were to stop for some reason. But they're also, they're on the hook. They're the ones kind of taking the debt. We have kind of a shared goal here to get this done.
I'd like to add to Councilmember Mensing's point is there a risk, though, with real estate and personal property if the commercial is either not, I don't want to say not built, but not successful or not filled because the people would be buying into the development with the idea that we're within walking distance of a movie theater or we're in walking distance of any other business. Let's say that there would be a depression in values on the real estate side because of lack of commercial development, that actually could hurt us on that other number.
Yeah, so where it would impact, if you look at this slide, I broke down the values of each component, right? The largest component is the residential. That's, just doing the math here, that's, like 80% of all the revenue. So, and clearly there's a market for residential development. So that is a risk. But I am more than confident, especially with the VRE garage location, we're going to make the commercial work. But even, let's say, worst case scenario, COVID-19 destroys our economy and there's just no commercial, right? There's still people that need homes. There's still going to be residential value. And you can see that the majority value from a real estate and all the 100% of the value from personal property is from the residential piece. But that alone would at least allow us to pay for that $46 million, right? Now you just have less of this, the profit and the fiscal impact, if the commercial fails and the commercial property values decrease. But again, people, to Chelsea's earlier point, the VRE station is what creates residential demand in that area as well. You're always going to have people, wanting to live close to the VRE station. So we've had tremendous residential demand in our city, despite the failures of Phase 1 city center commercial development.
And I just want to say, with all due respect to the Norton representative, we have to ask certain questions on behalf of our residents too, to make sure we're doing our due diligence. And I don't want to project failure at all. I hope it's very successful.
Any follow-up questions?
Are you keeping the property value the same, or were you escalating it through over the 30 years?
Yes. So it is escalating. We used a 2%,
2%.
which we've been doing much better than that. As example, this year we're going to grow by 4.9%. But again, we want to be, and we use a 10% margin of error for the assessed values as well. Or was it 5% at the end? Okay, yeah, 10%. So we said, okay, here's what we think it's going to value. Take 10% off that. And then we grew that by 2% instead of what we've actually been seeing in the market, which has been 4% growth is what we've really been seeing. But we want to keep this conservative.
Before we go on to the next question, I hear some background noise. Where would that be coming from?
So people need to mute their mics. If everyone can please mute their microphones.
Except when they're speaking.
Except when they're speaking. I believe Miriam had a question.
I think Miriam had a question.
Councilwoman Machado?
Yes, since the city is not going to have any debt, all the costs for the rent, for the city year's rent will come from the tax revenue from the new property. My question is for Laszlo, if we don't go ahead with this economic development phase 3, phase 4, how much will it cost for us to build a new city hall, school board, library, registrar office?
Yeah, so there's two ways we can approach it, right? We could renovate this existing building, right? Or we can build a brand new building. That's the truth also with Public Works. I think Public Works, you'd have to build a new building or purchase an existing industrial building. I think those are your options, and there's going to be different prices. To build this nice of a city hall and all the other amenities, remember Calvin came up with his analysis based off of the comp of the police station, and we determined it would cost us $40 million. So we can't do that. If this doesn't work, we're not going to pursue a real city hall. What we'd probably have to pursue is a renovation of this building, which would be a multi-million-dollar project. We saw how expensive trying to just renovate the small Blooms Park facility was. Imagine this building, how expensive. You're talking about, roughly at least $10 million for renovation. Public Works, I'd recommend pursuit of acquisition of an existing building, because building a brand new building, there's just no way we could pay for that. But to be honest with you, I'm not sure how we'd be able to pay for those things without dramatically changing our tax base. We could do it, but we'd have to defer renovations for our 4 schools, for police, for fire, and the community center. Whenever those come up due for major renovations in the 2030s, we would not be able to pursue those.
If I could just make one point, Mayor, or a couple points. One is that we have to remember that it's critical to get the VRE, future VRE garage in the new location to support the downtown. With the proposal that we're going to bring before you, or the agreement we'll bring before you at the end of April or the beginning of May, we'll have that. Okay, they'll have the ability to build the 2/2s in the back on the base track. We'll have the property, so we can make sure that happens. If something happens in the immediately afterwards that causes a problem with the retail, the fact that we have that garage there is going to help us get retail. And secondly, the details aren't specified yet, but everything we've seen from the Norton Scott team on the lease purchase agreement is the city would have a non-appropriation clause, which is something that I put in typically in other agreements, which says if there's no money, then we don't pay. Now, we would have to leave. They would have the interest. They would own the building, but we'd leave. But there still is that kind of backup, if you will.
So in the lease purchase, we could decide to end because we don't own it, and we could just say, we don't want City Hall there anymore. We don't want the registrar. We could vacate the building.
So that's an exit plan?
It's an exit plan. It's not one that you'd ever want to actually
No, it's not desirable.
do, because if you do that, then future agreements are going to be really hard to come by.
Is there an exit clause, like we just said we don't want to pay and we don't want City Hall to be? I mean, I'm just thinking of something catastrophic in the future. is there literally a, we don't want to be here and we don't want to pay it anymore?
Well,
Pick up and leave.
once the comprehensive agreement is approved, it sets into motion certain triggering events. So if you do approve the comprehensive agreement, then we would then advertise promptly for a bunch of public hearings. One would be to rezone Phase 1A, which is everything basically from Manassas Drive all the way to the back of the base track, and then on the opposite side of Park Center Court from City Hall. That all gets rezoned. Okay, it gets rezoned to the downtown mixed-use district. It allows for Norton Scott to do what they're going to do. They'll also hold a public hearing that night to actually do the land swap, we'll call it. But what it actually is Norton Scott would purchase Bay's tract, and their payment would be the 3 parcels that make up the what we're calling the Leatherberry tract, which is where we propose the BRE State garage to be. They'd swap that out, and then they'd also pay us the difference in value, assuming that the Bay's tract now has an increased value because it's now zoned MUD. So they'd give us that. We'd hold that in escrow for use later on when we go through this the process with Phase 1B and 2, when we come back for that rezoning and the conveyance of the City Hall piece. Okay, so it's a little complicated, but then we'd also do a public hearing to authorize the conveyance of the property to VRE for the parking garage as well. So there's a lot of things that would happen. Now, once we close on the property, and once you approve the rezoning, that is done. I mean, we're not going to undo that. Okay, so
I mean, I guess I was more in the idea of it's 2032, and a future city council, we're all gone, and it says we don't want to be in this agreement anymore. There's no exit agreement, like let's say.
Well, it would be a financial reason that you get out of it. It'd be a non-appropriation, so there's no money to appropriate. So we're not bound by it any further. So we'd be able to get out of it.
Right, but there's no otherwise. Like they just say we don't like this setup, or we think we can maybe Norton Scott or their successor can put more commercial in, and we can move City Hall to some other place. I mean, is there literally a termination clause for not?
Well, we don't have anything.
Not for not appropriation for some other reason.
No, there's nothing to propose. We don't have anything like that. No, we would be in breach of at least at that point.
Even if we had, let's say, we were able to get another leasing. I don't know what the right word is, but it's not Manassas Park, but.
Oh, you mean someone to go in?
They would basically, we would set up, I'm saying, in that scenario, we set up so that ABC company can come in and kind of assume our lease?
Well, that would be something we'd have to work out we don't have the lease in its form yet. It's all,
okay.
Right now it's theoretical. This is how we're going to do it. They're proposing this. It'll be part of the comprehensive agreement as far as how we're going to do it. The actual lease probably is not going to be in its final form by the time the comprehensive agreement's approved. It may have a form that we, have a substantially similar to clause in there, but there's a lot of additional legal documents that are required to make all this stuff go. And so whether we can get that done in time, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there will be because of the way that they're financing that through a certificate of participation. The majority of the building has to be for public use. So it has to remain public use. And that's, from my understanding, through the life of the term. So after fiscal year 52, then we have ownership and we can do with it what we would please after that point, right? Because the debt is paid for.
I believe so, that over the
Okay. So Mike, I don't know, Mike, if you heard that.
Yeah, can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, so they're talking about converting it to a private use in the future. From my understanding, with the certificate of participation, it has to be government use through the life of your certificate of participation, or the majority of it has to be public use. But then after 2052, when it goes into full ownership from the city, at that point, the city can do with it as it pleases.
That's correct. It's your property. There's no encumbrance under the lease after the full lease term.
And that's, to be honest with you, I would hope that the city manager at that point would recommend to fully pay it out, and then now you have that building. So even if there's a reason why you don't want to use it as City Hall, now you're talking about having major equity in the building that you can, if for whatever reason we determine we don't need a City Hall anymore, they could sell that at that point for something versus giving away all those payments that we did for no equity.
And I have two more questions. One is, and I may have more once I've done some more, but can we borrow against the building before 2052?
What do you mean borrow?
Use it as collateral.
Yes.
I mean, as in it's an asset, like an individual might use their house. The city could use its buildings if necessary. It's not a
Technically, I can answer that. Technically, it would be like your home mortgage. If you want to get a second on it, there are provisions that can be built into the lease purchase document to allow issuance of a parity obligation. In other words, an obligation that would share in the same collateral over the lease term. And that would be of equal priority to the lease purchase itself. So if you think of it as going out and taking a home equity loan, that's typically a second right obligation. And there are ways to write the lease purchase in a manner that allows you to issue parity obligations on that. So that equal in priority and all investors, if you will, share in the same pool of collateral. It'll be dependent on the value of the facility at that particular time, whether you can do it, whether the financial markets will accept an additional issuance, if you will. But it is possible.
Would that increase the interest rate from the start if you build that into the lease purchase? That ability?
It would not necessarily be the interest rate at the time. In fact, in today's market, a lot of those lease purchase obligations are being refinanced because rates have fallen over the last several years, and municipal rates are fairly low. This is a tax exempt rate. We'd be talking in our projections of this would go to market, if you will, at a sub 3% interest rate in today's market. So it's a very attractive interest environment in which to enter into one of these lease purchases. But if 20 years from now, rates were 1%, yes, it would be advantageous to you can refund that or prepay and refund that obligation at any time. Just like you could with your GO debt.
Yeah, so we could actually, 10 years from now, we get a huge windfall. We could actually pay out the lease earlier than expected.
Yeah,
hear that?
Prepay it.
Okay. And then I have one other question for you, Lazo. Thank you, Mr. Scott. And I'm going to bring it up because I've seen a lot on Facebook, social media, I've had some people contact me, obviously. The idea, and I'm just bringing this concern forward because I've heard more than once, we just send City Hall over to the community center because it's a building that we already have. We got space. You've probably seen that as well.
Yeah. So that could be done, but again, all the money that you would have to spend for renovating that building to work, and you would have to do that. You talk to the schools here, you talk to the registrar, you talk to the treasurer. You can't just have them move over there without fixing the building to match what their requirements are. So every dollar you're going to spend there, you're talking, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars at least, if you're lucky. You saw how expensive, again, the quotes that came in for the renovation of the Blooms Park facility were at least $600,000 for that small 4,000 square foot building. Now you're talking about trying to figure out how to renovate a 50,000 square foot building with 30,000 square foot city hall, remaining 20,000 for a community center. You're going to spend a lot of money. That money would be a burden on existing taxpayers. The difference is here, the burden here is on the revenue, the way to pay for the liability is different. For that scenario, moving to the community center, the liability falls on existing taxpayers. For this strategy, the liability is on the new development itself, right? That's what's paying for it. The problem with the community center as well, then, if you move all the components of schools, registrar, treasurer, commissioner, all the city administrative staff, you lose the majority or a big piece of the actual community center. So you'd have to get rid of a lot of programs like extended care, preschool. You'd probably be able to keep the gym, the pool, and the fitness center, or you can get rid of the fitness center and then maybe use that for the preschool, so you'd be losing a lot of services. So if you get rid of the fitness center now, you're going to lose memberships dramatically, right? So you're going to lose revenue from the community center itself, right? Now theoretically you'd be scaling back staff levels as well, so it might break even, but it may not. It may actually be a further tax impact on residents, but definitely the renovation, the retrofitting of that building would be a burden on existing taxpayers. And then again, there's no equity being built in that to then help resolve the public works component, because that building does not work for public works. And that remains actually the biggest capital liability that we have is the public works building.
Well, we would probably not be able to increase our cost recovery either
No, you would,
on the community center.
correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, memberships would drop dramatically.
And you didn't mention rentals. We would lose rentals at the community
Yes.
center.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because we'd probably have to use a banquet hall as well, so we'd lose all that rental revenue as well. Yeah.
Let me-
I just wanted to bring that up
I'm
because a lot
sorry,
of,
Are you finished?
I was just saying, I was bringing that up because that's one of the biggest things that I heard. The only other thought I had was, is if we did that, we would be increasing space for office and retail here on this site would be taken up by City Hall. Without City Hall being built here, we would have space for other things that are revenue producing that might outweigh the renovation cost of moving.
You could have some additional retail, but again, remember with the Street Sense market study, they highly recommended keeping government activity in the downtown to continue to drive traffic to the downtown for commercial success. They feel more comfortable about the viability of commercial if you're keeping your city functions here. I'm assuming you would share that same position as well. You're just bringing traffic to the downtown with the library, with the registrar, with the treasurer, the commissioner. That's helping the success of the commercial. So the street sense analysis would have to be projected down or brought down, so your market viability would then decrease at that point as well. So I'm not sure you would generate enough. Because remember, even with our city hall here, that half of the ground floor is already commercial, right? They're already building 38,000 square feet of commercial office on top of the theater. Phase 2 is going to have more commercial. Phase 4 is going to have commercial. You cannot build more than that. The market can only bear so much. So at the most, maybe you could get an additional 6,000 square feet of retail. But that itself would not offset the impact of all the renovation you're going to have to do at the community center, plus really the loss of service that you're going to have from the community center that our residents value.
At this point, I'd like to go back to the folks who are calling in. Councilmember Machado, do you have a follow-up to your question?
Yes, I do. So with this development, I think we have a win-win solution for all our needs, especially looking at the city hall building. So when is this city hall building be finished? Also, I have a question about the corner drive. Those two questions.
Okay. So let me go back to the overall layout so we can reference that. I'm sorry. Okay. So the City Hall building, to Dean's earlier point, there's a lot of moving pieces here, right? So a lot of it's going to depend on kind of final acquisition of the remaining parcels, how long that's going to take. The current tentative timeline, the goal is December of 2022 to have the new City Hall building ready so that we can move from here to that building, and then this site can be demolished for the entertainment anchor. But that relies on a lot of things going well. So that could be delayed because of delays in property acquisition or other components as well. But that is the goal, December 2022. And remember, where both parties are in the need to rush to get that done so they can continue to build more residential and we can get the commercial anchor that's part of the phase 1B of phase 3. And Miriam, I believe you had a question on Connor Drive, you said? Or Connor Road?
Yes, Connor Drive.
What was your question on that? The timeline for that road?
When are we going to have access back to Honor Drive, because now we're using Manassas Drive and the other street to 28. And when are we anticipating to have access to 28 via Honor Drive?
Yeah, that's a city capital project that Calvin's managing right now. Again, the goal for that was to start construction this year. There's still some, just like with this phase 3 that I just described, with difficulties with remaining property acquisitions and other things. That project continues to be delayed, but we certainly want to have that Connor Drive project, done sometime in 2021. That's the goal, is no later than 2021 to have that piece. But remember, there's multiple pieces of Connor Drive. There's getting it to connect to Route 28, and then there's the phase 4 piece, which brings it from Euclid Avenue to Manassas Drive. And then if you look at it from a phase 3 standpoint, having that extra road off of Manassas Drive, kind of across the street from Connor Drive, with direct access to the garage itself, so that theoretically someone could jump from 28 up here on a Connor Drive, drive through phase 4, and pull into here this way. So it would be another way for them to get in and out, access to the garage to Route 28. So that would help reduce the burden on both Manassas Drive and 28, and then Bloom's Quarry and 28 as well.
Where does it connect? Does it connect down here where the VRE?
Right.
Where does Euclid? Where does Connor on the map?
There's still no. Right now, the current plan is right here, so you'd kind of have to turn right and then left.
It can't go right into that. No.
It could, but then you'd be losing parking. That's the issue. That's the reason why we wanted to have the road down here. You lose.
Can't shift it so that they match up. If it's parking on the other side,
you
it
can
can't
shift it, but again, you lose parking ratios, which means you'd have to reduce retail or office square footage to be able to support the actual, to have enough parking to match the retail and the office.
They can't just move and the parking on this side of it instead of the parking on another side of it.
It's something that the developers can go back and look at it, but I know that's something that when their architects have been looking at that, they've been trying very hard to get the parking to work, the 540 spaces that are required, just moving everything around. It was one of the reasons why, again, the square was moved to the other side as well. They've been doing everything possible to get it, so any changes then, the numbers start to drop. We could do that, but then we would have to provide, if they lose parking, we'd have to provide a waiver for that. But then that just puts the whole retail at risk. But I see your point. It would make more sense just to have that crossing there. So if it's something that we want to put in, but then we'd either have to waive some of the parking requirements or reduce some of the retail or office square footage.
Okay, let's go back to our council members who are calling in.
Mayor, if I could real quick before you say that.
Yes, go ahead.
I've gotten a couple of comments that people need to speak into their mics very clearly. It's breaking up a little bit, fading in and out.
Okay.
I just got a comment that you were breaking up a little bit when you were talking as well, so we just need to be cognizant of where the mics are.
Okay. Councilmember Sendejas, do you have any final questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Vice Mayor Banks, do you have any final questions?
More. My concern is about looking at slide 11, the vacancy that's already in the area across the street at City Center. I'm looking at building B that's proposed. We spoke of market conditions. Market conditions have already changed due to COVID-19, right? Now we're having social distancing, and I think it may possibly affect the theater industry as well. So what if that theater does not come to building B, and we've got another vacant building in that area? What's our plans for that in terms of trying to come up with another tenant if the theater doesn't come through because of the change in market conditions?
Yeah, so it's still unclear what the full impact's going to be from COVID-19 in terms of retail. The hope is that everything will bounce back once the restrictions are lifted. The theater that we're communicating with, Cinema Cafe, is still expressed interest and went from wanting to do a 6-screen theater to a 9-screen theater despite COVID-19. So it really is going to depend on which businesses have more cash on hand and can weather the storm and for how long. right? So there's going to be some theaters that may go out, but others will survive. There's going to be a marketplace for movies in the future. So I don't see that. It could be a temporary issue, but there's always going to be a market for that. And some businesses may fail right now, and others, though, will have enough cash equity to make it through, or will receive support from the federal government to do so. But so let's say worst case scenario, we don't get the theater there. That's what we're actually writing into the agreement, that after December of 2024, if we haven't been able to land, close the agreement with the theater, then we would have other entertainment types uses on that facility, whether it's bowling or think of like a mom and pop version of Dave & Buster's. We are communicating with an owner of that type of business as well. We reached out to them because we thought that the theater was going to be cut in half, so we wanted to have another business adjacent to the theater that would also be of the entertainment venue as well.
I got one more follow-up. So in following that line of thought, how much square footage is that for building B? And what type of businesses could move in there if it wasn't a theater?
Yeah, so it's 42,000 square feet for the theater component, then you have an additional 3,000 square feet adjacent to that, right on that corner. Let me see if you can see my mouse cursor right here. That's a kind of another standalone retail to really enhance this four-corner area that Street Sense wanted us to focus on. Again, you'd have to move to other types of retail uses. I threw out a couple of examples. The bowling alley would probably be the best, but the mom and pop versions of like a Dave & Buster, kind of a gaming, bars, breweries, those are the things that you're going to want to look at for that. And again, there are a lot of burgeoning new business models that mix breweries, theater, bowling. So I don't see that market completely disappearing due to COVID-19. That there is going to be a market for that still when we get back.
I got one more. Sorry. Looking at again, slide 11. Those, I guess, the condo units on the right of the garage. No, that's not enough parking for those units. I mean, I live next to the Manassas Park Station, and I see all the parking on Indigo Drive. So, what's the plan for parking for those homeowners or whoever lives in those units? Are they going to just park in the garage? Because those are, that's going to be our requirements. So I don't think that's enough parking for their options.
Again, so they will build this to current zoning requirements. If we don't like the kind of current zoning guidelines, I think we should treat that as a separate issue versus specifically focusing on this development as a reason to critique our zoning ordinance. But this will be built per zoning requirements. Dean, do you want to-
And
I just want to.
I would make one comment about 4 or 5 years ago. We actually revisited the parking requirements and we increased the amount of parking. Preston, do you recall? I specifically met with one of the consultants along with the city manager at that time, who was not Laszlo, but our previous city manager, and the parking requirements were increased.
Yeah, and that's just to kind of follow up with that. Preston, we're still going to have a public hearing on the rezoning. Okay, and that the actual parking tabulations requirements will be addressed in that rezoning more specifically.
May I ask, Mayor, what is the current parking? Is it 1.75 spaces per unit?
Dean's going to have to answer that.
I believe it
I don't
is.
want to give you an incorrect
Oh, okay.
answer.
I believe it is, and I want to say, and Calvin, if you're on the line as well, I believe the garage counts for half the parking space, not
Mickey's
a full.
on the line too, I believe.
What's that?
I think Mickey's on the line too.
Oh, Mickey?
Michelle, Mickey, yeah, the garage spaces are counted as half a space under the zoning regulations.
Is it just the, I call it the basement level, but the lowest level, or is it all 4 levels?
What do you mean by all 4 levels?
Well, I think the garages are just on the bottom, so.
Each unit has their own garage.
Oh, I thought you were talking
Right.
about the VRE garage, the level on the bottom. You're talking about the individual garages with the units.
Yeah, individual garages for the.
Oh, okay, just sorry, we just
I
need
think the garage is
clarification.
going to have further parking for the downtown. We don't know the numbers right now, but it's looking somewhere between 90-ish or above. Yeah.
Is that each unit will be a one-car garage or a two-car garage? Like one-car garage with like the space in the front, kind of?
Sure. So typically with, we call these 2-over-2s. So it's a 2-story unit over a 2-story unit.
Right.
They're designed so that the lower level unit is typically a little bit smaller.
Right.
And they also typically command different pricing. There's 2 garage spots inside, one for each of the units, plus there's a driveway that accommodates 2 cars that's considered part of the lot. And then I believe your zoning, I can't remember exactly what it is, I think it's either 1 additional space per 10 or per 25 residential units. So I just want to remind you, so what, the next steps on this plan is to what we call hardline it with the civil engineer so that we can align it to the topography specifically. So we're not building over a dam or a stream or making sure the utilities can get in. As part of that, we will do the specific parking counts for both the driveways and for all of the on-street and or parking lots that will be scattered throughout the residential area specifically. So, you know, just to be clear, all of the parking that we've done in this plan is per use. There's the only potential shared use is for nights and weekends in the garage for the entertainment use, but that is above and beyond their requirement for daily parking.
The minimum.
Yeah, yeah.
And to your point, it is 1.75 spaces per dwelling unit, so each one of those 2-over-2s would be 1 dwelling unit, plus 1 space for each 10 dwelling units. Now, even after the rezoning, when they go to site plan it, if they can't fit the parking on there, they're going to have to reduce the number of units they have. So it's still, they're still, unless you give a waiver for it, they're going to have to meet these requirements.
You're saying that we will likely see 2.1 parking spaces per unit roughly if you're doing the garage plus the driveway plus 1 for every 10. So you're saying about 2.1 spaces per unit?
I can't do that math in my head, but yes. There was a significant number of off-garage, off-driveway spaces that we needed to find across the site. So that's parallel parking, that's parking lots, that's, you know, different places throughout the site.
It could be 1.85, right? 1/10 for each. If it's 1 per 10, then that's 1/10 plus the 1.75.
I mean, but what they're going to automatically do too.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of garage full space.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, even though some people may not park in the garage.
Gotcha.
You know.
If there are no further questions.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Oh, yes, certainly.
Will there be any sort of regulation in the parking garage for not leaving cars for multiple nights or storing cars in the VRE garage?
We're going to want to do that just to make sure that we have enough parking spaces for the VRE because we don't want to break our agreement with the VRE. So
Okay,
we're going to
so
have
we
to
will
put
do
some
that.
restrictions in there and then make sure that we have an agreement with the towing company and our police department to go in there and make sure cars are out by a certain time.
And that's a separate agreement as well. That's something we'll have to agree with VRE. If we're allowed to put the additional bottom floor on the garage, as we're hoping, then that would be something we would control. The joint use with VRE would be something we'd control through the agreement with them.
And that would be regardless of whether there's development or not?
Right.
Yeah, okay. So please email your questions. If you haven't already viewed the presentation on YouTube, please view the presentation. Send any governing body questions to City Manager and copy all of us so that we can have the benefit of the answers.
Do we want to include, just as a do we want to include Michelle? Do we want to include Mickey if we have?
I would say do City Manager, and he will route the question to the proper staffer, okay?
All right.
Let's move on to public comment now. There is no one in the audience here who has come in person, so we will move on to the emails that were sent in, and I will read the comments and questions in the order in which they arrived. So could someone please mute their microphone? There's still noises coming in. If that's the cause of a microphone, could you please mute it?
So can you also, well, I guess we can't do that. If you're calling in via phone, can you please mute your computer speakers? Because if you don't, you're gonna create some feedback as well.
The first comment is from Ms. Christina Batchelor, 9303 Nancy Street. To the governing body, please explain the ongoing efforts to shore up reserves and balance the budget if this project does not pass. Should the project proceed, would on-street parking be eliminated in the city center area? I can briefly address the current governing body perspective on shoring up reserves. The governing body is extremely concerned about budgeting. We have a desire for lean budgeting. The financial health of the city is very important to the governing body. And in addition to the impact on health and human life, we have seen the impact of the pandemic on the economy at large. So if anything has brought home the importance of large reserves and having stable reserves, it is certainly the pandemic of late. And I would turn it over to Laszlo for further explanation.
Yeah. In terms of reserves, so we have a plan to build up our reserves regardless of this. Because of the debt savings we're going to have, that's really the avenue for us to build up reserves. What the challenge is if we don't do something like this is where it limits our ability to do the other things we want to do, like the tax cuts. Like we can still do some of that, you just can't do it to the same levels, the pay raises, the additional funding that the schools are looking for. You can't do that stuff and build it. You can't do it all, it's simple math, unless you're generating additional revenue. So that's what the beauty of downtown development is. It gives you that extra revenue base to do beyond just our current plan.
And the parking?
Oh yeah, there's no intent of getting rid of on-street parking. We need all the parking we can get.
We absolutely do. Okay. The next email is from Mr. Noel Montisa, 9205 Golf Court. In response to your request for input regarding the downtown development, may I assume that a schedule of inflow/outflow was developed to provide the numbers in the presentation, starting from 2022 to 2050? I would think so because I was intrigued the numbers included sense given this is a plan and the amounts involved. That said, I support this plan, but we need to be sure, 1, Toll Brothers can sell those double-stack condos. 2, while you have a commitment, Cinema Cafe will anchor this area. We want to be sure stores can open as they did not in Phase 1. The cost of those retail stores in Phase 1 was untenable, and the idea back then was focused on pedestrian traffic. The thought was there was adequate planned parking space behind the apartments to support the retail stores below. To date, I have only seen 3 businesses. 1, violin lesson store that I believe already closed. 2, the bank that has been there since inception. And 3, I saw a small office space usage in one of the units. Well done on the presentation. Except for the existence of the VRE, I sense the area will look like the village in Leesburg or Fairfax Corner. Near the village in Leesburg has those double-stacked townhomes. I hope Toll Brothers addressed parking in their plans. I will guess each stack will have 4 vehicles, but I don't have the facts on that. Well, thank you for your support, Mr. Montisa. And Laszlo, can you address his concerns?
Yeah, I guess the first question was there a full financial analysis from FY22?
Inflow, outflow, yes.
Yes, absolutely. We did the full, and that's what that table on slide 18 shows, but it's based off of a spreadsheet. I developed my own spreadsheet. Developer did their own spreadsheet. We got together, we compared notes, and came up with an agreed upon kind of framework, but it does take, again, it's a model, so it's not going to be exact. I know we go down to the penny there, but it's really, you're looking at kind of large scale numbers, and again, the goal of that 26.5 million profit, right, is so that, let's say we're wrong by a few $1 million, well, you still have the profit there to make up for. So we did do that thorough analysis. I think he raises a lot of great points in terms of what happened with Phase 1 and the parking, and that's absolutely correct. And that's why it really has to be done together, the Phases 3 and 4, where you're addressing all the parking needs, or the majority of the parking needs for the downtown. Remember, it doesn't resolve all of Phase 1 parking, but it does the majority of it. We have some other plans for the future if needed, but I'm hoping with the new garage location that it actually would resolve, and with having the anchor there, that it would cause all of Phase 1 to be filled. But there is still some systemic problems with Phase 1 as well.
And I think his first question may have already been answered. Toll Brothers has the ability to sell the double stack.
Oh, is Howard on there? Howard, are you on?
If he could speak to
Yes,
demand.
I'm sorry.
This is Howard from Toll Brothers.
This is Howard Katz with Toll Brothers. Toll Brothers currently selling stacked townhomes in Fairfax and Loudoun counties. We've witnessed strong demand for this product with limited affordable home inventory in the market. Stacked townhomes provide similar square footage to townhomes, and in most instances are more affordable than towns, and they generate fewer school-age children than a traditional townhome. Location sells homes. The city is very fortunate to have the VRE station, and the PPEA is creating a transit-oriented development, a 24-hour destination. Our buyers are seeking these walkable locations with access to mass transit. So we're very excited about being part of this PPEA process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next email. This email is from Mr. Michael Carrera, no address listed. Mr. Palco, after reviewing your City of Manassas Park Downtown Development presentation, slide 24, I am concerned with the $40 million cost to implement the new City Hall and infrastructure. After proffers are paid, the city will incur an additional $25 million debt on its residents. The mayor, city council, and yourself should negotiate a better and more realistic solution that is cost neutral and does not depend on payments until FY52. Also, in the City of Manassas Park Downtown Development presentation, slide 16, the city would replace the National Registered Historic Place NHRP number 8100645, VLR number 152-0001, Connor House with mass residential. The Connor House is the only historic physical building in the City of Manassas Park and is an important part of the city culture and founding. I would ask that city elected leadership reconsider this reckless decision. I am not sure why the city is moving in a mass residential direction. That was the foundation of previous elected mayors. I am sure that the city residents and voters this November would oppose the following: new city hall and infrastructure cost of $40 million, $25 million in new city debt, destruction and demolition of the only historic building in the City of Manassas Park, the Connor House. I'll just briefly comment and then hand this off to Laszlo. This is indicative of the misinformation that is out and about in the community. The city is not incurring debt. As city manager said earlier, this is lease to own, which is a common principle, and how we obtain our police cars and other emergency items. And also, I think the public probably has not been well informed about the condition of the stone house. It's in very bad structural condition. In fact, it will eventually fall down. If a strong hurricane comes or a very strong storm comes to the area, it will certainly fall down a lot sooner than that. And then it will unfortunately cost the taxpayer dollars in order to haul away the rubble. So therefore the stone house is not really a consideration when the time comes for development decisions to be made. And I would like Laszlo to comment.
Yeah, so again, I think the use of the term debt is factually incorrect. I think the better term is liability. And of course, you are creating a new liability. But again, the city has a lot of liabilities, and a lot of them are unfunded liabilities. The beauty, again, with pursuing this type of development is you're able to address those unfunded liabilities, the City Hall and the Public Works Building, through the development, through the actual revenues generated from the development, and not on existing taxpayers. To not do something like this would actually hurt taxpayers, because we would have to figure out the solution for both of those facilities, but using existing tax base to pay for that. So I just want to make that point clear. It is a liability, a new liability that you're creating, but it's certainly not debt. No one's going to define that, our creditors, auditors, no one's going to actually define that as a general obligation or revenue debt. It's simply just another liability, like we have another liability we have, VRS retirement system. That's a liability as well, right? So you have to, with all these liabilities, you have to figure out ways to pay for them. Health insurance of our employees, all those other things are all liabilities that we have to figure out how to pay for, and generating additional revenue is the best way to do that. So not doing this type of development again is what's going to hurt city taxpayers who are trying to figure out what to do with City Hall, what to do with Public Works, and what to do with the Connor House building itself. I've already discussed kind of the community center as I know as the alternative option, but there's a lot of issues with that, and I would encourage everyone to discuss kind of what we've done extensive program analysis. So we have a consultant, Arcadis, who's been supporting us. Keith has been helping me out. We've engaged every stakeholder from up here at the schools. They did a great job of providing us what their facility requirements are. The registrar, of course, we did that in preparations for the Blooms facility, so we know what their requirements are. For every single department in City Hall, we have a much better understanding of what the space requirements are. It would be really, really tough to make the community center work, and you'd have to spend a significant amount of money to make that facility work. So I don't think there is a way to do that on the cheap without pursuing development like this. In terms of negotiating a cost-neutral deal, it comes down to simple math. They can't lose money on this deal, or else they'll walk away. So the math just doesn't work. You can't ask someone to build you something that costs more than the revenues that they're generating themselves from the project. So you can't just imagine that you can have a cost neutral. Now, if you had more land, right, and you could do even more residential development, then yeah, you could come up with additional revenue. But I don't think people want to do more residential development and we don't have the land. So this is the best deal that can be had with the amount of residential development that we're having here and the space limitations that we have. Just please confirm that the math just doesn't work. We went back and forth for a very, very long time trying to get the best deal, and this is what it is. So this is kind of the best option to make sure we can pay for these liabilities. I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
I'll just reiterate something that Laszlo put in his presentation, which was that, when we're purchasing adjacent land at commercial market rate to put into this project as well. So the land value that the city is getting for this is commensurate with market value. There were a lot of things that Laszlo negotiated as part of our negotiations that, maybe we wouldn't have wanted as the developer, but I think we ended up in a very fair place where, we feel like we are able to provide a transit-oriented development that is of high quality, that will be invested in for a long time. Norton Scott, we're long-term holders of our properties and we'll be holding the commercial piece for a very long time. We want to build communities that grow and work well over the long term. So I think Laszlo negotiated a very good deal for the city, and again, it is in keeping with market rate for land in this area. So.
Thank you. Okay, I see we have a question that has come in on the chat stream from the YouTube. Aaron Talley, I don't see an address, but Aaron Talley asked the question, is there a plan to add a pedestrian path across the railroad tracks along Manassas Drive?
Yeah, so let me go to the, I'm sorry if this takes a while, but that's a great question.
Does he mean at the surface or like a pedestrian bridge up over? Or does it
I
not
read
say?
it exactly as it was written.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so the beauty of this project, and I apologize if I didn't highlight that in my presentation. I thought I did, but there's a bridge right here, Pedestrian Bridge. So right now, I feel the pain of a lot of the people who live here is they have to walk down Manassas Drive across the tracks to get to the VRE station. It's not the safest pedestrian access. They can now walk, through the square. Again, I encourage them to get a cup of coffee from the Future Coffee Shop right here, and then walk across this bridge right here and be right at the heart of the terminal. So that's a safer pedestrian route. If they still want to stay on Manassas Drive, I agree. That is something that the city should look for in the future to make sure that these sidewalks on the other side are also paved for a better customer experience in terms of walking there. But again, you need the money for that. So there's a lot of demands that when I look, at the end of my presentation, I brought back the formula again, right? Remember the equilibrium formula. You need the money to pay for a lot of these things. And so I agree. I would love to have additional sidewalks on this side and be able to pay for that as well. But I think the bridge is a great pedestrian path for people living on this side of the city, whether they live in the immediate city center area or further up the street if they want to walk to the VRE garage. Now they have a safer way to do that.
It's shorter too.
Okay, Mr. Rick Hatcher, I hope that you're receiving us better. I know he left a comment on the chat stream that sometimes the voices fade, so I'm hoping you can hear us better. The next comment is from Ms. Patricia Painter Gillespie, 8648 Burnside. I just read that the governing body would like to tear down the Connor House to make room for a parking garage. As a 27-year citizen of Manassas Park and a citizen of Prince William before that, I feel this is wrong. This is the only historical landmark in Manassas Park. Talking about movie theater and library, etc., is the same things that was promised over 10 years ago when the city center was built. It is still sitting empty except for one business. I had also just read that the library was going to be put into the old pro shop at the golf course. Do you people really know what you're doing, or are you just promising the moon and can't deliver? Well, first of all, we said earlier the Connor House is structurally in bad shape. It's falling down. It will fall down eventually. If a bad storm or a hurricane comes inland, it will fall even sooner. And then, unfortunately, the city will have to use taxpayer dollars to move the rubble away. So that's basically the problem with the Connor House. It would take entirely too much to restore it. Restoration work is extremely expensive. You're looking at $500,000 to $1 million, perhaps even more than $1 million to restore that. When something is on the register, you can't just bring in any carpenter or any consultant to restore it. It has to be restored in a certain way. So the city could in no way afford to restore that property. And I would ask city manager to comment.
I don't know where to start. I don't know what specific points you want me to address.
Well, I mean,
the library? Or?
The individual seems to think that we are promising the moon and that we cannot deliver, which from the plan, we're closer to delivering success for the city than I think we've ever been.
Yeah, so if residents were promised a theater in phase one, I can't speak to bad planning in the past or bad promises. I mean, just to look at that, it just wouldn't work for a movie theater. So, I'm sorry to people if they were misled back in the 2000s about what was going to happen with phase one. Since the governing body hired me, they specifically asked, evaluate this, use consultants to see what happened, what are the issues and how we can fix it. This is a way to fix it. That's what we're proposing as a strategy to fix those broken promises of the past. In terms of the library, we are able to accomplish that. We've taken steps to already do that. It's an existing facility that the city has. There's no structural renovations that need to be done with the retail site there on the golf course, so it's already ready for use for the library, and we'll be saving over $200,000 this year from pursuing that option versus continuing to pay the county, and that couldn't have been more timely with the COVID-19 recession to have any savings that we can have right now. So it's promising less than what we're currently doing. We're actually cutting expenditures on the library.
And I would say this is an extremely well thought out project. This is not a fly-by-night project. It went through many, many steps, as city manager can tell you, through the consultant, through the planning stages. We are working with top-notch people in Norton Scott. We are poised for success, and I've always been very optimistic, very proud of Manassas Park and very optimistic that we will be successful. I would ask if we have any call-ins. No call-ins. Are there any other questions that have come in via email? Any other questions on the YouTube stream?
No more questions.
May I follow up though too, is that I think
Yes,
that
wait.
maybe,
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
I think, and I don't want to speak for her, but I think, I know Trish Gillespie, she's one of my neighbors.
Okay.
I think maybe she was getting to that there were promises made and not kept. And, definitely on commercial, I mean, maybe not the movie theater specifically, but just commercial generally. And we were promised that we would have the commercial with phase one, and that commercial never truly materialized. So I think it's a little, maybe not specific to the movie theater, but more of a general, we were promised a mixed-use development.
Well, and we can't really speak to that. We weren't here then. I
Right,
mean,
yeah.
I wasn't here. Most of us were not here.
Right, yeah.
Laszlo's new.
I was here.
Well,
That's because you're
That's all your
old.
fault.
I mean, I just
Yeah.
want you, I think it's,
I think it's,
many residents that are, I guess like myself, we've been here quite a while. We have heard other plans, and we've had other promises by maybe previous governing bodies or previous staff, and, this is gonna be great, and, look at this and this and this and this, and the project was approved, or projects were approved, and we got the residential,
Well,
and we didn't get the commercial.
And I want to be fair to previous governing bodies as well.
Yeah.
They perhaps were promised things by other developers that did not have the great foundation that Norton Scott has, for
Right.
example. And as city manager has told us in the past, if we had to start from scratch and we had no development over there at City Hall, this
do
would
it
be done
differently.
completely
Right.
differently.
Yeah.
Can you address
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. And we should never promise, there's no guarantees when you come to any kind of market development, right? But there's no guarantees in anything in life. But what you want to do is always go in with the best plan for success. So what they did with phase one would be like a sports team just having half of their team and promising victory, right? You're putting yourselves at a very disadvantaged position. Here, we'll have a full team, so we're doing everything possible to make it work, right? But there's never any guarantees in anything in life. But if you want a successful downtown, this is how you would do it based off the conditions you have right now, right? To the mayor's point, if we had all the land from phase one, phase two, phase three, and also a partner that we have now in phase four, we could do a much better development. But we're constrained with what we have right now. So we're rolling out the most viable plan with the existing constraints right now. And if we don't do anything, what is guaranteed is that phase one will never be fixed. So if your goal is to have phase one fixed, you take the best strategy to do that. By not doing anything, you guarantee phase one will fail.
And I appreciate, I was bringing that comment forward only
Right,
because
right.
I think a lot of the longer-term residents, she's voicing an opinion, and, in some ways, a statement of fact is phase one was not as successful as promised.
Right.
And I'm saying that in the most positive way, not to try to share blame, but that, they've seen things, and they've seen in her proposals, and they're a little skeptical, and they're a little, hesitant that, is this really going to be as good as it's promised?
Well,
And I just.
Yeah, and let
a
me
lot-
add to that. I mean, I've lived here since 1994. I was also disappointed to see that commercial did not move into city center.
Right.
But as city manager said, if we had a blank slate to work with,
I know.
it would have unfolded a
lot
completely
differently.
different situation.
Absolutely.
And we can't hold past events against current events. We have to move forward the best we possibly can right now with the options that we have right now. That's what I would say to the entire community.
Right.
We're doing the best we can. City manager is doing the best he can. And, I don't know what else to say. Nothing is guaranteed, but it looks very promising.
And the status quo without a downtown is a financially difficult one going forward. So those are kind of the options as well. We can either plan to maximize the chances to become a financially strong city, or we can continue to have the same kind of trade-off discussions that have been happening over the last 20 years for how do we find ways to to fund things, or why do we have such a high tax rate, right? And we're trying to get that tax rate down, but again, it comes down to simple math. You got to come up with the revenue, or you can do dramatic cuts, right, as the alternative. But again, we're already the lowest FTEs. We already, our debt is higher than everyone else. That's for certain, but that's a fixed cost. That's not anything we can do about it except continuing trying to refinance and let the debt curve go down so that we're in a healthier position there. But we need to come up with the money somehow, and this is the best way for us to pursue revenue, along with eventually Route 28 redevelopment.
Councilmember Javed?
Yeah, I have two questions, if I may. One was, I guess, a follow-up question to an earlier comment from Ms. Batchelor regarding the Manassas Drive parallel parking. Would that street parking be used, if we're going to have a retail across the street, would it be used for residential and retail, or just retail? Would it be metered? I mean, is it going to be a 2-hour parking? Is there going to be any regulations?
Yeah, so you will collectively have to make that decision for where you can. I think there's some areas where I think the owners across the street may have some say in that as well. My recommendation is going to be to make that 2 to 3 hour, probably 3-hour parking, right? Not metered though, because you don't want to charge people to park, right? So you want to do something like a 3-hour parking so that it does support the retail and it's not taken up by the residential. Because the parking on Market Street and Manassas Drive, when Phase 1 was developed per the ground lease, that's supposed to be for retail, once you have retail there. But you're right, it's being used by residential components. But remember, I did the whole drone analysis of the parking requirements. They don't need that. That back parking lot is completely empty because it's farther, it's farther away. So that's the beauty of Phase 4. It brings that parking lot to Manassas Drive. So then if you can start enforcing 2 to 3 hour parking on the commercial parking spaces, at least residents now at Phase 1 have a closer parking option for themselves as well to park, so they don't have to walk too far. Because that back parking lot could be a walk for them, and maybe that's why it's more convenient for them to park on Manassas Drive and Market Street than it is that back parking lot.
And follow up?
Yeah, we'll follow up to that. During rush hour traffic, 2-lane, I've seen someone take up basically a whole right lane trying to parallel park, given basically traffic all the way up down to that 7-Eleven intersection. If we're going to have more traffic coming this way, do you think it's wise to have parallel parking in front of the commercial?
I'm just
You
can have
thinking out
angled
loud.
parking too, but you would have to widen the road.
Yeah, I think
So
angled
you
parking might
lose-
be a little.
But you lose retail space by doing that. You lose, overall acreage by widening, and then now that's, if there's concern about the price tag on City Hall, try widening Manassas Drive. That's going to be a very expensive project as well, and I think angled parking when you're backing out is also not entirely safe.
No.
So again, always the best way when you're talking about retail parking, it's its own parking lot, right? Fronting the retail here, and then fronting the retail is the parking. So it's it's a safer way. But we went for the plan was to have kind of a walkable downtown with retail fronting Manassas Drive. So I don't think there's any good solutions there. And I think there's no perfect plan. And I think that is one of the issues, one of the concerns on Manassas Drive is that parking. You're right, there could be some issues with that.
And then my last comment was, if that's, the residential is considered a condominiums, don't they have to have some type of a recreational use, like a tennis court, basketball court for condominium bylaws? I don't know if maybe someone from Toll Brothers could answer that one, or I don't.
I think that would be governed. You think that's a state requirement, or I think that would be I think the city would have. Is that right, Dean?
What's this?
Like for condominium associations to require tennis courts and other amenities, is that a city function, or is that?
That would be a zoning issue.
Okay, zoning.
Have that part of the zoning, but once they
Mickey, are you on there still?
Yes, I mean,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I think the only thing in the NED requires that there be 25% open space, or nothing that's specific about recreational amenities, what specific recreational amenities there should be. That is open-ended, but there's no really requirements, but even in a condo to have recreation is usually done through the zoning district, but there's nothing specific in the NED district to require such items as a tennis court or any kind of court
And I would
of any sort. It's just a 25% open space.
And I would recommend against, if you look at other town centers, they don't have that. It is more of a kind of an urban feel, because that's the goal you're trying to get to. I think by all the green space we have in the city now, I think there's plenty of recreational opportunities for our residents, especially with the addition of Blooms Park. But this, we're trying to make it a modern town center urban feel versus, having a lot of open green space in the downtown. I think the city has added a ton of open space over the last year.
We don't want to lose commercial space.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and the added benefit is it might be a better selling point in the sense that, condo association fees are generally relatively higher, than a townhouse or single family. And so without a lot of additional amenities that the HOA, or I don't know what you would call it, but a COA would be responsible for, it keeps the fees lower, and it makes the sales actually more attractive because the total cost every month would be less if you're not paying, you can pay several $100s a month in condo association fees, particularly if you're maintaining a lot of common, pool or tennis courts and basketball courts. Those get costly to maintain as they age.
Plus, we want to welcome those residents to our community center.
That's
as
right.
well, become
Absolutely.
members,
Right.
and
Yeah.
And Blooms Park and Signal Hill Park and with
Right.
Signal Bay Water
Right.
Park. And
A couple more comments from the stream on YouTube. Aaron Talley says, "Thank you for your response. I was talking about the path along the road. This would help make the new downtown area more accessible to those that live south of the train tracks." So-
that was exactly the point I was talking about on
Okay.
this side of the train tracks here. He's right, that we do need to improve that with sidewalks, because it is a treacherous walk. So I think that should be something that the city's looking to fix, but again, we need to come up with the revenues for how to do that.
Yeah, of course. And Mr. David Wilmore made the comment, thanks to the city officials and governing body for personally risking their health to work for the citizens. And I can tell you, Mr. Wilmore, we are observing social distancing here. We all have 6 feet between us, so I think we're fine. I think we're absolutely fine. And Robin Hatcher commented, "Thank you for making this meeting available on YouTube for residents to listen live." We are enjoying this also, Ms. Hatcher. Thank you very much for the comment. We hope to have this streaming capability in the governing body chambers in the future. Cross my fingers. Thank you. Are there any other comments that have come in? Okay.
I like the participation. This is different, but I like it because it's.
Yes.
people
I think
can
there's
com-
more participation,
Yes.
actually. I think this is great.
Yeah.
And they can comment, after the presentation, they were able to
Yes.
do follow-up comments,
Yes.
which we don't always get.
Okay, so if there are no more comments from the public, we will go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Do we need the people at home? Do we need to hear from them?
When will this go up for a vote,
Jeanette.
City Manager? What is the anticipated date for this?
Well, I think that's something we'll talk about with the
We'll talk
schedule.
about later.
But the earliest we could do it is April 30th. That's a Thursday. So if we want to stick with the Tuesdays, then it would be May 5th.
Okay.
But I believe, Dean, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to talk about the upcoming
Right,
meetings.
we will,
Yeah.
yeah. That's one of the items you added.
8D.
I think Donald had a point.
Okay.
Did we get votes from the 3 people at home? I didn't hear them through the.
To close the meeting, Preston and Mary.
I didn't hear their. I don't know if they're
Excuse me.
still on the line, but
Excuse me.
I just want to make sure.
Could, Councilmember Machado, what was your vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Sendejas, what was your vote?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Banks, what was your vote?
Aye.
And thank you, and my apologies. We won't forget you for the next several votes. Okay, moving on, no consent agenda. Unfinished business would be 7A. Our next item is regarding term lengths for library advisory board members in order to provide staggered terms of service and retain institutional knowledge on that board.
Thank you. I appreciate you adding this. You remember last meeting, you went ahead and appointed the members of the Library Advisory Board. The idea was that we weren't sure how long each one would want to serve, so we asked them. And so last night at their meeting, they did do that. So they made a recommendation. I'll read that to you. The recommendation for 4 years, since they're required to have 2 at 4-year terms, Michelle Hurd and Robin Hatcher. For 3 years was Anne Marie Stewart. 2 years was Lillian Jude. And 1 year was Andrea Barbuza.
Well, we thank you again, folks, for your willingness to serve on the Library Advisory Board. If there are no comments and questions, we would like a motion to approve the length of terms recommended by the Library Advisory Board as just articulated by City Attorney.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And we got them
Let
up
me,
on video too, by the way.
Yeah,
We
we
can see
have
them.
to. I beg
Oh,
your
there
pardon?
they are. What, they
We can
raised
see
their
them.
hands there.
We actually can see them.
Oh, boy, that helps. That helps. Councilmember Machado, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Sendejas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Banks?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to new business.
When's their next meeting, by the way? Are they meeting April 6th?
We're covering that
We're
under
gonna do that
8D.
later.
Oh, okay, sorry.
8D, yeah.
But were you asking about the library? or-
Yeah, library.
Oh, the library, I believe, was June 11th is their next meeting.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about.
Oh, no, I was wondering
Yeah,
when they're gonna
okay.
meet.
They only meet
Okay.
quarterly?
Yeah.
Right now, yeah. They can change it, like if they want to meet monthly, they can later on, but the recommendation, because of COVID-19 right now, is to wait until June. But currently, it is quarterly meetings, but they can alter that.
Oh, I guess I'm just a little worried because if we're going to open on July 1st, they may need to meet before then to make sure the details are settled. Or
Well, we
That's
have it.
probably open-ended, right? I mean, they could meet.
Well, they're meeting June 11th, so that would be before the July opening. I don't know if we're going to have to delay the July opening because of COVID-19 or not. The goal is to still have it up and running, but if the governor extends his order, then we won't be able to do that. But they did take action. They approved their bylaws last night, and then they forwarded the recommended policies and strategic plan. Once that's adopted, we can go ahead and open the library and get state funding, assuming we submit the application by April 15th. And then again, during the summertime or fall, whenever we want to do it, we can revisit all these documents and see what other improvements we want to make.
Mhm. Okay. Moving on to new business, per city attorney recommendation, 8A is now 8B and 8B is 8A. They're just flipped around from what was loaded on the city website. So the first one will be remote participation policy update for changes in Virginia code.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, nothing really has changed that would affect this. All that they took out, we used to have additional stuff that was allowed. They took that out, so now you just do it for a disability, whether temporary or permanent, or of a personal reason. So for tonight's meeting, we have 3 governing body members that are participating remotely. We're using that under the personal reason, because obviously it's not a disability. So that's how we're doing that. But this here just updates it to conform with the Freedom of Information Act changes that were made a couple of years ago. I think we brought this up once before. I don't know if it was ever adopted. We couldn't find it in the resolution book that it had been, so that's the main reason it's here tonight.
Okay, okay. Are there any questions for city attorney?
It's the second page of the resolution. It's 3A. It says remote participation is not available for closed meetings. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that's the same as it was. I think if I remember correctly, the discussion back in 2015 when the original policy was approved, the idea was that because you're in a closed meeting, you can't guarantee who's on the other end. People might be calling in and have spouses or children or family members walking around, which would obviously waive the attorney-client privilege if that's the reason we were going in, or potentially jeopardize, whatever the reason was we were going to closed meeting to begin with. So that was the thinking behind that. I believe that was the thinking behind it. It's not required. I mean, you could allow it, and as a matter of fact, the next resolution addresses that during the COVID-19.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because it seemed like it was the opposite of what we were going to do.
Right, and that's why we're in this particular order of resolutions, is because this resolution would be, or this policy, if you approve it, would be in place, until it's amended, whereas the resolution that comes after this is just a temporary one. It's only got a 6-month period maximum, and then so that it automatically expires. So you can always change it, and you can actually allow for it if you want right now. You can make a change right now, but I just kept it the way it had been, and only made the changes that were pursuant to the changes in the code.
I guess the only thought was if it was because we were trying to maintain the closed session element of it. If they're on video, let's say we can see all three of them there. We can verify if they're there by themselves or not.
Well, you don't know who's sitting next to Miriam.
The camera's not
would-
there.
Actually
Yeah.
cannot, Donald.
Well, but
Okay.
we would.
I mean, I don't. I was just thinking is that.
Preston, we can, and he's got a big wide view.
I mean, I guess I'm thinking is like if it's just the phone and it's audio, you couldn't. But with the possibility of video, you actually could. We could sweep the room and say, okay, is there somebody standing next to you?
But then someone could enter the room
Yeah,
immediately
everybody-
after
someone
you
sitting
sweep the
on
room.
Plus,
so-
my recommend.
So let's not split
Well, my
hairs.
recommendation would be to log off of GoToMeeting and just use the phone to ensure that there is no one else accessing that information if it's closed session anyways. So we wouldn't have the video. So it would just be phone.
And that individual did not use speakerphone.
Well, then, yeah, you could put it on speaker, then someone else could hear it.
You could do that with the
could
phone
always go old
regardless.
school.
Yeah.
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 I mean,
Well, and truth be told, I mean, there's nothing that, you can't be sure that one of those people isn't telling their spouse anyway. So, I mean,
Right,
it's all, honor.
Yeah.
So you
I
just
mean, there can be
take it
leaks
from
at
there.
any time, right?
Right.
Yeah, and there have been,
So
I'm
if
sure.
you ask them if they're by
Yeah.
themselves or not,
Marriage trumps law, I guess.
Okay, staff recommendation is that the governing body adopt the revised remote participation policy by resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, let's start with our folks at home. Councilmember Machado.
I
Councilmember
approve.
Sendejas.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Banks.
Aye.
Okay, folks, how do we vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously.
We need to get a little yes/no cards they can hold up.
Okay, next item is resolution to establish methods and procedures during COVID-19 pandemic.
I drafted this one up based upon the policy that we've been discussing over email. Many jurisdictions have taken the position that they're going to allow entirely electronic meetings. I don't believe that that's permitted under the current law. And I think that we would have some problems down the road potentially because, we have public hearings coming up and you can't hold a public hearing remotely. I mean, it's just the whole concept of public hearing is that you're publicly present, at least under the current code. The General Assembly may very well take this up and change it, but right now, we're not allowed to do that. And so because we have important issues coming up, I felt it was better to try and live within the existing code. So with that in mind, that means that we're doing this, what we're doing tonight, but there's also some other things that would be implemented for a 6-month period. One of which is that if you want to live stream your meeting, you do it here, because this has the live stream capability. All other public bodies will just continue to meet downstairs in the governing body chambers. To your point, Donald, the second item is that we allow for closed meeting participation remotely, just during the term of this resolution. And then it just directs the governor or the city manager to go ahead and basically implement the methods and procedures to make all this happen and allow public communication. I think tonight went rather well. So basically, it's just saying do what we did tonight, and then just to actively encourage the public to not show up unless they feel a need to, but to use other means to communicate.
Okay.
And as I stated, this would be in effect only until the earlier of September 30th, 2020, or the date that COVID-19 has been adequately contained and the appropriate state and federal authorities have determined that normal societal activity can resume. So,
Okay.
my recommendation
So
is
the-
that you
Yeah,
adopt
and
it.
the closed session portion of this will sunset when the pandemic is lifted.
Right, once this is, the pandemic's over and we can go ahead and go about regular business, you would no longer have closed meeting.
And if this passes, I would request that city clerk place this on the homepage of the website, the city website. So, okay, staff recommendation is that the governing body adopt the resolution to establish methods and procedures during COVID-19 pandemic.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Machado, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Sendejas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Banks?
Aye.
All in favor here?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, our next item is resolution designating planning commission size.
And I appreciate you adding this one. The reason is that right now, we have a 7-member planning commission. We have 2 vacancies. Nobody's stepped up. The governing body hasn't actively sought out a replacement appointment. The state code and in our code also allow for a 5-member to a 15-member planning commission. Well, unfortunately, because we had a 7-member before, that means 4 have to actually be physically present for a meeting to occur, and that includes for a remote participation, and they have their own policy. We've been informed that 1 member is not going to be able to show up at the next meeting at which they're going to have a public hearing on the CIP, which obviously is a very important component of the budget. And another member feels that she's a member of a group that really should, stay at home. And so now we're down to 3. And so if we can't get this resolved, then they're just basically not going to have that meeting. So since there's no need or no intent to fill those 2 vacancies, my recommendation is you just establish this a 5-member planning commission, which is permitted under our code and under the state code, until further you decide to change your mind. This is just a resolution, you can change it, but this establishes so they can hold their meeting.
I have a question. If a 6th person were to step forward and be interested in the planning commission, would they be able to join the planning commission, or would we need to pass another resolution first?
You'd have to, well, you could do the resolution the same night.
Okay.
You
okay.
could do it all in one,
Sure.
doing this and appointing this person.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on this?
Has it always been 7, or have we kind of gone
It's
back and
fluctuated.
forth?
It was 5 for a while, then it went up to 7. It's been 7 for quite a while now, right? But, we're just having a difficult time getting people to serve on it.
Okay. Staff recommendation is to pass this resolution designating the planning commission as a 5-member body. Councilmember Machado?
So moved.
Aye.
Oh, sorry.
We haven't got,
We have a motion, and who seconded it?
Alana.
Alana, thank you. Councilmember Machado?
Aye.
Councilmember Sendejas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Banks?
Aye.
Okay, all in favor here?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. This really gets confusing when you have folks up there and folks here, so thank you for your patience with me. Okay, our next is 8D, proposed schedule discussion.
Let me pull up my email. for
Do we
that
have,
one.
do we have, is that part of this packet here? Is it, or is it just something?
This is one that I sent earlier to you.
Is it here? It should be here,
It's not, I don't think it's in your packet. It was
No,
an
we
email that I
don't.
sent.
Okay.
Okay. I remember you sent us an email, but I just can't remember all the
Yeah, and I
dates.
figured it was, it was easier just to explain it because, it wasn't part of the original package you got, so people we're going to have. So the reason for this request, and the request is that we change the current approved schedule. Because we're using the remote participation to try and limit the potential for spread of COVID-19, we're stuck with the requirements under the Freedom of Information Act that says that each governing body member can only do this for a personal reason twice in any calendar year. So that means that for all practical purposes, if you're swapping it, we're maximizing this, so 4 of you are physically present, 3 of you are remote participating as we're doing tonight, then we only have 4 meetings we can play with. Okay, and we have some very important things that need to occur here in the near future. So with that, let me just explain what I think the dates should be and what should occur, and then we can talk about it a little bit more as what the pluses and minuses of that are. So tonight, obviously, would be the first of the 4 remote participation meetings. Public hearing for Norton Scott's PPEA proposal is held tonight, this had to occur at least 30 days prior to your consideration of the comprehensive agreement by law. So then we would have, I propose another meeting for April 14th. Now, I wanted to just throw this at you because, as you mentioned, the governing body needs to approve the policy for the library board, or for the library, and that has to occur by when?
Before April 15th.
Right, so April 14th, is that going to be okay? I mean, because...
Yes, because we could, if it's adopted on April 14th, because we can send everything on the 14th and let them know that we would get the final approved strat plan over to the state the next day. So we would meet the April 15th deadline.
All right, I just thought of that when you were talking.
That's a good point. Yeah.
All right, so with that understanding, April 14th would be the second of the 4 remote participation meetings. At this meeting, because we need to have the school board's budget.
Wow, that's cutting it close.
I mean, this whole thing's been kind of by the seat of your pants.
So let me remind everyone that according to the governor's executive order, operations of government are exempt, and as long as we maintain, as we are tonight, social distancing, we're setting a good example for the public. So if we have to meet prior to April 14th, I don't really see a problem with all 7 governing body members meeting.
Yeah, well, and there's also
or
the
at least
potential...
at least a quorum without the
Right.
call-in,
So if a quorum decided to meet and the other 3 were comfortable just voicing their position, then that would work as well. If there were 3 that were concerned about showing up. But, there's ways around it, but if we're going to maintain the 4-member, 3 members remoting in, we're stuck with this 4 meeting maximum.
We can't change the 2 for personal reasons. We can't change that. We can't change the number of
That's
meetings.
state law.
Oh, it's state law.
Yeah, and I'll get to that in our
Okay.
discussion later on about, what ifs. So the school board budget has to be presented at some point, and the idea would be that at that April 14th meeting, the school board budget and potentially the city's proposed budget would be presented. It's kind of a first draft, and you could, have that all over. And then you could send your questions, comments to the city manager, to the school, I guess it would be the school board as well. And then April 30th or May 5th, and remember, April 30th is the 30th day from today, so that's the very soonest that you can meet to approve the comprehensive agreement, but it's a Thursday, okay, and that's unusual, and I don't know if it's necessarily a good idea to meet on a Thursday when people are used to governing body meetings being on Tuesday. So if we're going to do that, the meeting would be on May 5th. Okay, and whatever day you choose for that meeting, that would be the 3rd of those 4, and then the comprehensive agreement would be presented to you for a vote. The resolution approving the school division's budget could be voted on at that meeting. That would give them, we're supposed to do it by May 15th. I think in a pinch, we could probably get away with the May 19th, but if you're ready to vote for it on May 5th, we'll pass that by resolution, because you remember it becomes part of the budget, which is approved by ordinance. We pass it by resolution for the school board budget, just so they have some finality and they know what they can expect.
When is the governor's veto session? When will we know hard budget numbers from the state?
I don't know that.
Aren't they April 20, isn't it April 22nd or something like that?
Are you talking about like for the school contribution or?
Well,
all?
no, is that the state, they're going to deal with some of this budget stuff at the veto session, and it thought it was April 22nd, but I'm not 100% sure that's the right date.
I think that depends on how fast they can do the analysis, because Virginia's going to probably receive $3 billion. So they need to do an analysis as to where to direct those funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much of those funds are mandated to be used in a certain way. Do we know that yet?
I can't speak to that. All I can say is that, remember the VML link that I sent earlier today about the sales tax? They confirmed that they did not evaluate yet the COVID-19 impacts on that. So they're still doing the analysis. So we can talk about kind of budget strategy for why I think it's feasible, the dates that Dean is laying out. I can kind of lay out the roadmap for.
I mean, will schools know their state, the amount of state money they will have by the May 5th and be able to?
Well, we're not required to approve their budget for 30 days after those numbers become final? The later of 30 days after or May 15th. So if we're getting that information at the end of April, then we have a little bit of additional time.
But the problem is they may have received numbers already, but they're not the adjusted numbers.
Right.
So, but that's where I think appropriations are going to be very key next year, how we manage appropriations. Because you want to control that just in case the state isn't sure until May or June. And I don't blame them for not knowing yet. But let's say they find out in June, July that all revenues are coming down, right? We just need to be cautious with how much we're appropriating to all groups. We may want to consider monthly, just to be able to control until we get better information.
Huge, big.
It's a bug.
Yeah.
A stink bug, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to make
Well-
sure that we would know what the budget
Right,
numbers
and this is
from-
why I'm concerned that we have the flexibility to meet in a manner other than remoting in.
And keep bear in mind that these would be the set dates, and then any other meeting would be a special meeting.
Okay,
So that's all you could discuss at the special meeting without a unanimous
okay.
approval.
Is it possible to set up another 1 or 2 meeting times and then, so they're not designated as a special meeting, but if they're not needed, we could cancel them?
We already have that already set up. I mean, all these dates, with the exception of April 30th, were already in the, so you already have those.
Okay, so what is not here, in other words? Is there
Yeah.
anything missing?
April
Let me put the
7th,
question.
yeah, April 7th, April 21st. Let me pull up my calendar here.
April 21st?
Yep,
Now, the
those terms.
7th would be too soon.
I just, again, with the concern about funding, you're going to be voting for the budgets in June and the appropriation as well, right? The budget, what you advertise, is just your ceiling. You don't have to appropriate that full amount. You can appropriate less. You can do bi-monthly, right? Just keep appropriating it every month until we figure out what the impact is. So I don't see the need for a lot of meetings, because I think you can control that. And Dean, correct me if I'm wrong. You don't have to appropriate the full budget amount.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You just have to meet the minimum standard, or the minimum requirement by the state. And we more than meet that, so you do have the ability to adjust.
So, in other words, what the meetings that are set up now, according to our calendar, will this supersede those dates?
Basically, what you would do is the
Or
days
are they
you.
in addition to those dates?
No, these are all already
Yeah.
in those dates. It's just that you wouldn't meet on some of those dates.
Yeah, every
Okay.
Tuesday from March, from today until, I think sometime in June, was designated as a meeting date to go over
Okay,
the budget.
okay.
So all we're doing is we're saying we don't have to meet on all those dates. And especially because,
Okay, but my question
Yeah.
is, by saying that we don't have to meet on those dates, that doesn't take away the ability to meet on those dates?
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
I think they're trying to condense the,
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
a
no, I just want to make
Oh,
sure
yeah.
that we know what we're voting on
Right.
here, or what we're deciding.
Yeah, this is just a proposal for how to handle this COVID-19 thing and still maintain, within the bounds of the law.
So in other words, if we pass this and we decide to meet both April 30th and May 5th, if some unusual circumstance arises, we will be able to do that.
April 30th is not currently, that's
Now,
a
April 30th
Thursday.
is a Thursday, you're
Yeah.
right, so you're right, that's a different one.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
So
But all the other ones, April 21st,
Okay, so
May.
say hypothetically then, April 21st, if something very unusual happens, we would still be able to meet on that date. This does not supersede that list.
No, this is
Okay,
just a
okay.
recommendation for how to manage during this time. So
Okay.
the meetings are still going to be per your approved schedule. It's just that, Lana will just post there's no meeting to be held.
Okay, that's what I wanted to confirm to
Right.
make
Yeah.
sure. Thank
Right.
you.
You're
Okay.
welcome. But I would urge you that if you do decide to meet on one of those days, you don't do it by remote participation because, then we're limiting ourselves. We
Right.
need to kind of be
And that's
very-
why I brought up the part about the governor's executive order exempting operations of government.
Right.
And we would observe social distancing.
Right, I think it should be for some very unusual special purpose, to try to treat it as a special meeting for that reason, so you don't have to.
Although it would not technically be a
No,
special
it
meeting.
wouldn't be.
And we could
Basically,
discuss anything.
You could, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
except for tonight.
No, I just don't want to limit us. I just don't want to limit our ability to operate.
This
That's all.
is just a proposal that I'm recommending to you for the analysts. I mean, you still have your already scheduled dates.
Okay.
We need to be cognizant of that, so Atlanta can let everyone know that we're not
Okay.
holding a meeting.
Do we need to vote on this, or is consensus sufficient?
Well, I need to get, I guess consensus is okay, I just need to get some sense from you whether or not, I need to make sure you understand some of the ramifications of this and moving forward. So I'd like to finish kind of the discussion of what's going to happen on each of those meeting days.
Okay. Council members at home, were you able to receive this and read what Dean is talking about?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thumbs up.
Thumbs up. You got it. You received 3 thumbs up.
Yeah, they say yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm just reading this for the
Okay.
audience.
Okay,
If
go ahead.
anyone's watching.
Go ahead.
Okay, so as I said, so I'm assuming we're going with May 5th then, because May 5th is a date that's already been scheduled. So we'll do May 5th will be the 3rd. That's when the conference of agreement will be presented to you for a vote. And then you can also approve the resolution, if you're ready, for the school board's budget that night, and then talk about the tax rate and this, additional comments about the tax rate, school budget and such, to give direction to staff. And then, obviously continue to email in between. May 19th is a kind of a big day. So if you'll notice there, that is only 2 weeks after May 5th. To meet the advertising requirements for the rezoning that we're going to propose for May 19th, we're going to have to advertise right away. And I think that means the advertisement needs to go in the paper May 6th and then May 13th. Okay, so that means we have to actually get the advertisement to the paper the previous Friday, which is before your May 5th meeting. So previously, you were going to be meeting on April 30th. We were going to send the advertisement in on May 1st. So I just want to let you know, we're going to actually be sending the advertisement in to be in the paper before you guys actually meet on May 5th to approve the conference of agreement. So we take a risk in that you don't approve the conference of agreement. Now we've just spent money on the advertisement, but we don't really have any other option.
Why couldn't that vote be done on April 30th?
Because it could be that we put it there, but that's a Thursday, and the idea is that you don't want to give the public the sense that we're trying to pull some backroom deal, by doing it on Thursday. People might not be aware of it. They don't show up. They don't participate live. A Tuesday, they know there's going to be a meeting. They're looking for it, so there's probably more participation or viewership.
But Dean, just to clarify, the only consequence is the money we spent for the advertisement.
Right.
Because we can get to the public hearing and say there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
it's really
yeah.
just a couple $100 for the advertisement. That's the risk.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, your legislative authority is that you decide not to approve the conference agreement. You have the full right to do that all the way up until you vote. You can just walk away from it. So we don't want to make assumptions, but we have to get that in there. And I just don't want you to be surprised when we do that and starting to ask questions like, oh, you just assumed we were going to approve this thing. That's not the case. We just need to anticipate just in case.
The only thing I'm concerned about is the library issue falling together. I'm worried about the April 14th.
Well, you have the option on April 7th. If everything's ready, you can do all this stuff on April 7th instead of the 14th. I mean, nothing requires you to wait until the 14th. And if the budget's ready, though, I mean, it may not be ready.
Well, instead of April 14th? Well, the schools said that they needed until April 14th. I'm working like crazy to get my presentation recorded this Friday for the budget, so you all can watch it this weekend, because I was preparing for April 7th still. Preparing 2 budgets for you all. If I had the time, I would appreciate it, for April 14th instead of April 7th. Now, I would still do a recording, even if it's April 14th. My plan would be to do a recording this Friday about the kind of larger picture of what's happening, right, with the financial situation. And then next Friday, maybe record a part 2, which is going over all the charts, right? So that would be my plan if we're sticking to April 14th. I would prefer that, because we're working on a lot of things right now, between the downtown COVID-19 response and now the budget. I'm worried about not being done with presentation.
And I'm not talking about moving that date up regarding that. I'm just talking about the library.
You're saying
library alone.
Too close for the 15th deadline?
Yeah, I'm worried about that.
Oh, you mean just having a meeting on the 7th?
Just
For the
to
library.
address the library issue, yeah.
I mean, the only risk is if you don't approve anything on April 14th. That would be the risk.
Would you have ample time if it was approved, I guess?
Yeah, I would email it that night.
Okay.
Oh.
You're sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
If the
Okay.
deadline's
Oh, that's
April
fine.
15th.
But
Okay.
what would be the downside if we moved it to April 7th?
No, we could do that. It's just, to Dean's point, you're adding an extra meeting, so.
Oh,
either
okay, you just cancel
all
them. Oh, I
7
see.
would have to be present,
Yeah.
or you would all have to agree on which 4 would actually be able to vote physically on it if you don't want all 7. So the other 3 would be able to chime in via email before to say, here's what I want to see changed, right? There's not a lot, because again, remember, they just need something. Whatever you pass on April 14th, you can amend it on April 21st or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so there's time to look at these documents and improve them. We just need something. I guess it's too late to do it tonight, just to approve whatever the library board does.
Honestly, we're going to have whatever we present to you, you're going to vet it. You're going to be sending all your comments, and we're going to be fixing it, getting it ready for your, so by the time you have the meeting, 3 of you really don't need to be there, because it's going to be what you guys have all kind of pretty much agreed on, via communication anyway.
No, and that's fine. I don't have any quibble with that. I'm just concerned with the turn time, but.
Yeah, April 7th.
It's
Maybe,
due
yeah.
midnight of the 15th. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's due on the 15th. I don't know if it's close of business.
Close of
or-
business,
Yeah,
okay.
probably close of business that they
Okay.
can see it there. But yeah, if you all feel comfortable just meeting 4 people just to ratify the library stuff on April 7th, that makes sense. I just want to make sure that no one feels left out of the process.
Okay.
Oh, so you're saying we're going to take the April 7th meeting away and just meet on the 14th? So there's no meeting on the 7th?
Well,
Well,
no.
that's what we're trying to, that's what we're
Decide,
talking
right,
about.
right.
Right now, what I've proposed is that, but the mayor has
Right.
said that she doesn't feel comfortable with waiting until the 14th for the library,
right.
so that maybe that one item alone
Can
is
just meet.
discussed and voted on the 7th. Instead of having all of you there, maybe just the quorum shows up. The other 3 that aren't there have already made their opinions known, so it's almost like voting by proxy, although it's not, but you're voting with the will of the whole governing body, but you're going to be having a lot of input on what that document looks like well before that meeting. So by the time you're voting on it, it should be a 5-minute meeting.
Well, then, yeah, I think the 14th should be fine. We'll do everything on the 14th.
Yeah, if everyone's comfortable with that, that's fine. I mean, I'm still worried about it, but.
Let me double check with
If
the
everybody's
state.
comfy, that's fine.
I can check with
Yeah.
the state and send up a follow-up.
So let's get some input from Councilmember Machado. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm okay with April 14 if we still have April 15 to send the package.
Councilmember Sendejas?
I agree with Councilmember Machado.
Vice Mayor Banks?
I agree as well.
Okay, okay. Well, it looks like that's what it is.
14th then would be,
Uh-huh.
okay, good. So
Okay.
then the 14th and the next meeting would be the 5th, as we
Yes.
discussed. And then the 4th of those 4 remote participating meeting, participation, fourth of those meetings is the 19th. So we're going to have a bunch of public hearings that we're proposing for that night. Okay, one of them would be the Phase 1A rezoning application that the city is going to initiate on its own, and that was discussed during the public hearing. We'll also have the 2 public hearings I discussed as far as the property. So one would be the sale, if you will, of the Bays tract in return for receiving the Leatherberry tract and additional funds. And then the next public hearing would be to authorize conveying that to the VRE for the VRE garage. So, and then we also have some additional public hearings. So we have the tax rate public hearing is required that night. We have the budget public hearing that we're going to have to hold that night. And then you also need to hold a public hearing for school board members. So that's coming up as well.
Okay.
So this is May 19th? We're all
May
talking
19th is
about?
going to be a lot of public hearings.
What is the deadline for school board applicants?
I haven't, I will be setting that in April, and we'll let you know. Now, are you going to want to interview? Or with everything going on?
Wow.
Questions by email, and they can submit it.
I can
Yeah.
do the, I can send the questions and
I would
all,
say
but-
email and by phone.
Okay.
We could use
Yeah.
GoToMeeting as well, if you
Yeah.
want to.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
you can't have more than, I mean, you can't have more than 2
Oh, I'm
governing
thinking the
bodies.
mayor.
Oh, the
like,
mayor.
Like we did the library, where everyone just sends the questions.
Okay. If they're-
Would that be agreeable to everyone?
I think the,
Or do you want to, is it possible like all 7 of us can be here and then we interview the applicant through video?
Only if you're going to do one of, it's got to be a public, it's got to be a meeting, open to the public.
Right.
Could we do it on the 5th?
So,
If there's even more than one.
Well, yeah, you could. I mean, if that, so you're saying that on the 5th, you're doing the remote, and then so after you've done everything else, you go ahead and adjourn the public portion, the televised portion, and just do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's like a work session almost. I mean, I don't know if you want to publicize it or air it or not, but it would be not the working meeting, it would be a work session type.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem with that at all.
okay. Does everyone,
5th is-
so that would be May 5th, is that?
Yeah, because really, you're
Did I
just
hear
voting
that
on
correctly?
the...
Did I
Yeah,
hear
May
that?
5th would be the interviews, and then May 19th would be the public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, there's some discussion about the tax rate and the budget, but and the other items that I'm anticipating are not, shouldn't take that long, so.
And then I guess the applicants will be on the go-to meeting?
Yeah, we would send out, as soon as you all find out who they are, we can send.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's,
Yeah, and then you can,
Okay.
just like this, but they'd be the only ones on there.
yeah.
Them plus the 3 other governing body members, so we would reduce all the number of callers there. So you would see, 4 people up there.
If I recall, I think, didn't we just interview one school member at a time?
Oh,
Were
that's
they-
what we usually do.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yes,
saying,
yeah.
so it'd be 3 council members
Yeah.
plus the person being interviewed.
It's not like a cage match or anything.
Well, I'm saying then I guess one of them, if we have multiple applicants, they would have to mute or turn off their video. I'm just
Well-
trying to see the logic,
Well, they
logistic.
would call in until their time. is.
Yeah, we would have to,
Yeah.
we'd have to
We
call them.
wouldn't
Text
even
them,
want
be
them
like-
on the call until.
Yeah,
it was-
yeah.
Set up
That's-
different go-to
Yeah.
invitations for each one, right?
So-
We could, yeah, because I have one, Keith has one, and then Chris, so we
Oh.
have,
Well, that's what I was saying, because they could log in at the same time,
Sure.
turn it off and hear the
we'll send
interview.
out different go-to.
Well, you'll be able to see who's logged
Oh,
on
okay.
anyway, so that if just one of them's...
Yeah, all right, yeah, that's fine. If we got the logistics worked out.
Yeah.
All right, so then,
So
back
do-
to May 19th.
Yeah, does everyone understand why we're doing May 5th and not April 30th? Does everybody get that? Okay.
I guess we need a thumbs up from the folks at remote.
Thumbs up, okay?
Preston's good.
Hector's asleep.
Hector's
Thumbs
good.
up? Okay.
Miriam's good, all right.
Yep, Miriam's good. Hector, did I see thumbs up?
Yeah, he gave a thumbs up.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so then, And so I just wanted to discuss a little bit, so let's see, all the stuff that's happening on May 19th, you can choose to not vote on it that night, but for the stuff associated with the rezoning and the 2 property conveyances, we need to have that approved the same night. Because if you're going to approve it, it's got to be voted on that same night because of the VRE garage schedule that we have. That's the driving force behind that. Everything else, I think, is fine if you wait on the vote. The tax rate, the budget, those have to be done by June 30th, and then the school board, when does that have to be done? When do they have to vote on that?
It has to be done by June 30th.
Okay, so all of them could be at the next meeting, and that's, so what I've proposed then.
Well, you can't vote on it that night, you have to wait.
Right, but I'm trying to figure out the dates. So it just has to be before June 30th. So I'm proposing the next meeting you meet then would be June 10th, or after June 10th, which is the governor's current expiration of Executive Order 55. Okay, so assuming everything goes well, they get this virus under control, and June 10th comes along and we're all back to normal, now we just go back to normal meetings. And so the idea would be that we're hopeful for that, and that you should therefore schedule your next meeting for the first Tuesday after that June 10th, which is June 16th. So June 16th comes along, you vote on the tax rate, the budget, and the school board members all at that meeting, and then whatever else is going on. Now, there's an outside chance, of course, that Executive Order 55 is extended or even strengthened to not allow both governments to meet. If it's just extended, then we're in a bit of a quandary as far as the 2 meeting per year requirement. But what I propose, since we would then have had all the public hearings done, and I don't think you can ratify a public hearing that's never occurred, right? So what I'm proposing is you just go ahead and continue to meet remotely, doing the swap like you are, and then the first meeting at which we no longer have this order in effect, then you would just go ahead and ratify all actions taken at those meetings. Because technically, you cannot meet remotely, but I think that's the least onerous of our options at that point. The other option is to do what a lot of other jurisdictions are doing and use a provision in state code, it's 15.2-1413, which allows for extraordinary measures to be taken for continuity of government. A lot of them are taking that and assuming that that gives them the authority to basically overrule state code, other provisions of state code. I'm not taking that position. I don't think it allows you to suddenly say all meetings are going to be remote. We don't even have to have a quorum physically present, which is what they're doing. Okay, they're doing public hearings without people being able to show up, so they're locking down. Public doesn't have access. I mean, an argument can be made that we provided more access tonight than ordinarily is here physically, but I don't think that that's the way the courts are going to look at it. There's an assumption that maybe the legislature is going to come back and make some changes to the FOIA. I think that's possible, but I don't want to, hang the future of the city on that. And then there's potential that a court that's viewing this will look at these extraordinary times and say, okay, these are valid meetings, and we're going to allow you to do a ratification action later for the public hearings you didn't have. Again, I don't want to take that chance, and I don't think we need to. So I think if we get to June 10th and we're still under a lockdown, if you want to call it that, then I think we just go ahead at that point and just waive the 2 meeting a year requirement, and we'll just deal with that. I don't think we have any public hearings that would be a concern. So really, it'd just be kind of like sometimes the mayor or the city manager, there's some emergency contract that has to occur because something has happened. We can't meet yet, so we get consensus that you all agree that they can sign it with the understanding it's not a valid contract until it actually is approved in a public meeting, and you still have the option to say no, so you're not giving up your legislative authority and there's no illegal meeting that's occurred. We would do something like that. We'd have a cleansing vote afterwards that basically ratifies everything that's been done and move on. So that's my proposal for how we get through this.
And just to add additional kind of context for the budget, so I did let the schools know that they can also record, so we can help them with recording their budget message. I'm going to record the city manager budget presentation, and then all the department directors will record their presentations, just like tonight's downtown development. So you'll have those videos on YouTube to watch. So when we meet, it's just more of a Q&A, so we can get through the meetings a little bit quicker as well. So April 14th, because I'm presenting two budgets. One of them is kind of continuing with the 2% increase in salaries and some other spending increases, and then the other one that's just flat. You can still advertise the higher budget, right? But then you just end up approving the flat budget, and then later on via amendment, when we get more information, we can either go up to match the 2% budget, or if we need to, worst case, we can scale back. So that's kind of the timeline. We need to advertise something for the May 19th public hearing. We need to advertise it by the last week of April. So that April 14th meeting is where you all just need to, give the thumbs up, say yay or nay on advertising which budget. My recommendation would be just advertise a higher budget. That way you still have more time to think about what you want to do. If you want to truly go with the flat budget, the higher budget, or somewhere in between, or lower, but you can still just advertise that higher budget to give you more flexibility.
I mean, how would the public be aware of a flat budget?
Well, it's going to be part of my presentation. So I'm going to actually provide two spreadsheets, two kind of PowerPoint versions of it. The flat one's going to be very easy because it's going to look a lot like FY20, except, healthcare has gone up 5%, VRS contributions 2%, right? There's things like that I'm going to highlight that are the differences. So even the flat budget technically is going to be higher. Certainly the 2% budget is going to have to tap into fund balance significantly to be balanced, and that's the concern. So ultimately, just to let you know, I'm probably going to recommend go with the flat budget right now, right? You'll see my assumptions for sales tax, meals taxes, and all those other things. But
you can't advertise both together, side by side?
I don't think you need to, because you advertise a higher amount, you can still vote on the lower amount. What you can't do is advertise the lower amount and then vote on the higher. So by advertising the higher amounts, you can go anywhere below that. You can even go lower than the flat budget. If
We can always choose to be more conservative spending.
So that's even on the budget, not just the tax rate?
What's that?
That's with the budget, not just the tax rate?
Yes. Yeah, that's a spending.
The restriction really is on the tax rate. So the budget, as long as you're not forced to raise the tax rate, you're okay.
Oh, so the expenditures aren't.
I don't believe there's that same limitation. I might be wrong, but I think that the only limitation is on the tax rate. You cannot approve a tax rate greater than the one you advertise.
Correct, yeah.
Now, budget, when you advertise the budget, and I think I'm right on this, I have to verify, but I'm pretty sure that on the budget, as long as it doesn't impact the tax rate, you're okay.
What about if it goes above 1% higher than what we advertise?
Well, that's a problem, yeah.
Yeah.
The 1% is the threshold for the budget.
Got it. So you would be able to approve a higher budget than advertised as long as it's not more than 1% higher than what was advertised. You would have to re-advertise for that.
Well, the law really is you can't, once you approve a budget, you can't spend more than, what is it? You can't do anything that's going to make, now I'm confusing. You cannot spend more than would be more than 1% of the budget. So I'm not sure the 1% applies to an advertising for approval, but I think that you use that logic.
But we can do less.
Yes. And always do less.
Yeah, I was just worried about the public information.
Yeah, I mean, I can still advertise and say here are the two different.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any restrictions about advertising.
That we're considering a flat budget as well.
Two different budgets.
What do we want?
No, that's actually better.
Okay.
The more information you provide, the better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the public needs to know that really a flat budget is probably going to be in order because there's so much that we do not know.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we lock that in for the next.
Yes, it doesn't lock it in,
No,
but at least
I'm not saying
advertising.
to lock it in.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, yeah.
My concern is we may have to go lower.
Yeah.
I'm making some assumptions.
And that's where the public we need to make sure that they're aware of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just how lean it's going to get. Reminds me of my grandmother always used to say, be careful with your finances. She'd say, squeeze a dollar till it hollers, so.
And I'm trying to get an answer for you on this, by the way, so.
Okay.
Budget.
The folks at home, do you have any comments or questions? Councilmember Machado?
I think she's frozen.
No, I don't.
Thank you. Councilmember Sendejas?
I agree with Hasib about advertising both budgets, because of course there's no certainty about what's going to happen in the next few quarters, so those are my only comments.
Vice Mayor Banks?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. We're sort of killing time here too while city attorney.
Yeah, I'm not
looks
seeing anything.
something up.
Basically, it just says that you just have to give a brief synopsis of the budget, which is for informative and fiscal planning purposes only. I'm not seeing anything in the budget provisions of the state code that says anything about, going above and below. But I would urge you to keep that in mind. But clearly, if you advertise a tax rate, and you advertise a budget that's based on that tax rate, you can't then increase the budget, which would require a commensurate increase in the tax rate.
Well,
I think that's the
we'll be
limitation.
increasing anything this year.
Yeah. Always go down.
Yeah.
Lessen the impact of the
Yeah, we'll
taxpayer.
The 1% has to do with the amended budget.
Right, exactly. That's my point. I don't think that language would apply necessarily, but we could certainly use that argument, if we were challenged. But I don't think it's going to be necessary because.
Okay. So, if you're finished with your
I am.
explanation, Dean, we can try to get a consensus here.
Yes, please.
Okay. Is there, Donald, consensus?
Yeah, I really, if we can, and I'm willing to set the next one out to kind of make it fair, because I know that people, that are sitting at home, but especially those 2 in May, is to have all 7 of us here, if we can. I mean, I know we're supposed to be social distancing. I mean, 7 of us are here, when 3 staffers can be in the audience. We really need all.
It's doable. It is.
We really
doable.
need all 7 of us here, as many
Well,
meetings as
and
possible.
from my perspective, I'm supposed to be in the at-risk group, but I don't feel at risk. I certainly don't feel vulnerable. I'm a senior citizen, but, I wash my hands all the time. I'm
You're a
very
senior
careful.
citizen?
So I know what
Yeah.
you're saying. So we wash our hands. We're as careful as we possibly can be, Okay.
I just,
Alana?
Yep, sounds, okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Councilmember Machado, do you agree with Dean's proposed scheduling and how the organization that he has put forward here?
Yes.
Councilmember Sendejas? Thumbs up,
Yes.
okay. Vice Mayor Banks?
Yes.
Okay, well, we have a unanimous consensus, Dean.
All right,
Okay.
thanks.
That's fine, thanks, everyone. Okay, moving on to manager's report.
So I just wanted to thank city staff for the last few weeks for everything they've been doing, especially Keith. He's been really the point person for COVID-19. We've been working long hours to make everything work, but everyone's really contributed. Don's incredible with helping everything get set up from an IT standpoint, helping people work remotely. Our Parks and Rec staff was ahead of the game when it came to food delivery services directly to residents. Jeanette and I were on a call earlier this week where other jurisdictions are trying to figure out how to do it, but our Parks and Rec staff with leadership of Keith figured that out kind of early on with the help of Randy and her department. Randy's department's starting to see an uptick in application benefits. They're still going out to do CPS, APS investigations, so putting themselves at risk for the public. Our fire department as well continues to be in the front line in terms of EMS response to help those who need the services. Our police with helping to enforce social distancing and exposing themselves at the same time. Everyone across the city is really chipping in and working hard to make all this work and to continue to provide services to our residents during this time. So I just wanted to thank all staff members who are working really hard right now and putting themselves at risk to continue to serve the public, and especially Keith for everything he's been doing the last few weeks.
Please extend the appreciation of the entire governing body, because we really appreciate everything everyone has done. And like you said, we are head and shoulders above many jurisdictions. They're still trying to figure out how to use a roster, so we're way ahead.
And may I add just a shout out to the school division, because they're doing some great things, And it's funny is this, I don't know if anybody saw this, maybe yesterday, day before, Prince William has decided because of the COVID that they want to buy, devices for all their high school students. And I was, chit-chatting with some of my friends that teach in Prince William, like, well, all of our kids, K-12, have them. And they're actually waited to the crisis, and they have no plan in place. They're doing very little to no distance learning, I don't know what they're calling it, but they're not doing a whole lot because the kids don't have access, all the kids don't have access to devices and things so that teaching can continue to happen. And so they're not, places like Prince William and Fairfax, others, they're not doing distance learning, they're just kind of vacationing, kind of. So just kudos to the school division. I know that they started the ground running too, as soon as they were out from the governor.
Just make one more point too, because I know our Parks and Rec staff sometimes take a beating from the public in terms of kind of the value of their services, but they are, almost the lead for a lot of emergency situations when it comes to shelter operations, or in this case as well. They are the flexible organization that we can utilize to provide unique services because everyone else has to keep doing their job. Police has to do their job, fire has to do their job, social services has to continue functioning. So it's really Parks and Rec that provides that extra capacity that the city needs for surging or for shifting focus. So they transform from a Parks and Rec department to a food service delivery agency within a week. So that's just the value of our Parks and Rec department. So I just felt the public deserves to hear that.
Right.
That's
How is our
excellent.
fire department doing with supplies, masks?
Yeah, we're doing well right now. Keith is tracking along with all the departments. So fire department is sharing their assets with social services, with police as well. But they're evaluating burn rates for how much we're utilizing to get us through this period, and we feel comfortable. We put in a procurement request as well as part of a regional procurement plan for some more assets as well, but we're continuing to track that right now. As of right now, we're still doing fine.
Okay.
Food is the bigger issue where we're still working on acquisition of food.
Who have you made a procurement request to?
Do you want to? Actually,
Good evening. It's a multi-jurisdictional purchase order, really spearheaded by Loudoun County. It's with a vendor called JP Production Promotional Products, and it's for N95 as well as surgical mask.
Okay, thank you.
Stafford County was doing that?
Stafford.
Yeah, not Loudon.
It's Stafford County who took the lead.
Are we getting appropriate support from the state and the federal levels for what we need here in the city?
We were also on that conference call together.
It'll probably be best to answer the state or in terms of federal. Again, the testing is the lack of testing is still the biggest problems, and then kind of the bigger concern is kind of hospital surge capacity as well. So that's one of the big priorities right now, is identifying what the solution is going to be if we become like New York and we need to find additional assets. So that's really where the federal government can help. Now, the stimulus bill, I think, is a good thing for helping out businesses and residents who are struggling. So I think that was a huge benefit. But testing from a specific COVID-19 response, that's the biggest issue that we're having in terms of support from the federal government. But Jeanette, if you want to comment on the state.
I would refer you to my previous email where I outlined everything that was discussed on that governor's call.
Right.
So it's, everything's up in the air, and we don't know what we're going to get. I mean, it's unfortunate. And the call that Laszlo and I were on together, there seems to be also a level of disorganization amongst the localities across Northern Virginia. They say we've got to stick together because we're not going to get possibly the help we need from the states, and we've got to take care of our own, we've got to stick together, but yet there's no action item that indicates how that's going to get done. So there's a lot of talk, but not much follow through. So actually we are, I think, on our own.
That's a little scary that there's not more coordination.
There is not the coordination that is needed, in my personal opinion.
There's
I would agree with
coordination
that.
at the local government attorneys level, at least. There's a lot of discussion going on about how to do a lot of this stuff. And I wanted to bring something up to you as well. I've been asked to sign an agreement that's amongst all the various attorneys. It basically says that any attorney-client privileged information that might be shared as part of this is to be considered privileged still and cannot be released, and that we would defend it as such. I didn't feel comfortable signing that unless I at least got your okay. I don't think there's a problem with it, but the attorney-client privilege is not my privilege, it's your privilege. And the agreement says it's confidential and it will only be shared with the other attorneys, which means I can't show it to you. So I didn't feel comfortable signing that without at least addressing or bringing it up with you and see what your thoughts are on it.
What is their purpose for asking you for this?
Well, I think it's more of a preemptive thing, because when things get crazy, information is shared, and it's a collegial body, and information might be shared that would be deemed as a waiver of the attorney-client privilege without this. So typically, you have to intentionally waive the attorney-client privilege. So, for instance, if one of you was to go ahead and share something that was a privileged communication without the consent of the rest of the governing body, our argument in court would be that no, we shouldn't. That it should still be considered privileged communication, even though someone has waived it. That person didn't have the authority of the governing body to do so. Okay, so that's an argument to be made. The judge may not agree, but that's the argument to be made. So the idea here is that if we end up sharing stuff, we're clearly trying to manage a situation and not be thinking in the back of your mind, okay, well, we might be sharing something that is privileged communication. The idea is to try to preempt anyone's effort to get a hold of that information by having this document in place that says there was never our intent, and we've all agreed to continue to treat it as privileged communication. Therefore, Your Honor, we're going to argue that it should not be released. It should not be. It should not lose its privilege because there was no waiver.
If attorney-client privilege is meant, say, for example, for you and the governing body, then how is that going to apply inter-attorney?
Well, the idea is that each attorney, while not working for you, was part of a broader effort that was the good for the community, or the good for all, if you will. And so there was a collaboration required, and that the amount of time required to go back and forth to get permission might be unreasonable. So I mean, it's more of a. I don't really think it's ever going to be necessary, to be honest with you. I mean, especially for us. It may be for some of the bigger jurisdictions, but for Manassas Park, I don't really think it's necessary. But it's been circulated. The people who are circulating it are also the ones that are kind of coordinating a lot of the efforts to deal with some of the legal issues that we're seeing for the first time. I don't know how they'd take it if we didn't sign it. Maybe they would kick me out of the club or something. I don't know.
Could you give an example of where, like, what kind of information could get shared? And
well, perhaps maybe my recommendations to you in a closed meeting on how to deal with a specific issue around maybe a resident who is sick, and my advice to you, I could then share and say this was my advice to my governing body. They would take that and maybe they'd use that as well, or maybe I could get that information from them. It's something that oftentimes is done amongst local government attorneys for non-privileged information, and the idea is that you don't want to have to put on your hat and always be on guard when you're trying to fight something that might be a very serious threat to life. And so, I mean, I think it's just a preemptive measure more than anything else. That kind of information is not typically shared unless it's unintentional.
So do you need for us to give you
I just want you to be aware of it, and see if
so
you
we're
have
not
a problem
being asked.
with
We're not being asked for a decision this evening. In
well,
other words.
I could see, in the next week, if I haven't signed it, they might start wondering why we haven't signed it. I think there's a sense of urgency since everything's happening very quickly. So I guess what I'm looking for is just kind of an understanding of what your thoughts are on it, so I can, know a little bit more and maybe act accordingly.
Well, my thoughts are that it does not sound as though it's something that's needed.
I don't think it is, but I don't want to offend, I think is really the main reason, and I don't want to be excluded from a discussion group because they're afraid that they might say something that, would be waiving the privilege.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
that element.
So the repercussions are worse for not signing it than signing it?
I think so.
Well,
I don't think there's any privileged information that I'm going to ever.
Sort of
be-
like the COG letter earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we're going to be in the same level of concern as some of the larger jurisdictions. I mean, they have big problems.
Okay.
I think by the time we have those problems, it's gonna- a lot of the issues have already been resolved, and we're going to know how to deal with it.
So if you were to sign, we are essentially relying on you not to share anything that you feel that we would not want you to share.
Oh, that's always the case.
Okay,
I don't ever share.
Then sign it.
you know. I mean, it's just more of a, I think it's more of a preemptive oops type of thing than anything else.
Okay. Do the folks at home have any questions? Councilmember Machado?
No, I don't.
Councilmember Sendejas?
Guess that's no.
No? Okay.
No.
Vice Mayor Banks?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, I appreciate that.
Okay.
I may or may not sign it, but at least now I know that I have
Yeah,
your,
okay.
I'm not going to be too upset if I do.
No. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make one more thanks to the school. I know you mentioned this at the start, but thank you to the schools for facilitating
Yeah.
this meeting.
Yeah, we appreciate the
yeah.
use of this space very much. Yeah. So, managers report, you have nothing more to report, so no closed meeting. Adjournment, do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Machado?
Aye.
Councilmember Sendejas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Banks?
Aye.
All here in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, abstained, we're adjourned. Thank you.
That went really well.